80 years old, now assumes the mantle at the helm of the Indian Congress Party ahead of a tough election battle in 2025. FSN's Ishan Garg in our Delhi bureau has more.
Mallikarjun Kharge has been with the Congress Party for nearly 3 decades now. He's considered an experienced leader and one who's close to the Gandhi family. He's promised reforms in the party, but analysts say his proximity to Sonia and Rahul Gandhi could mean that not much will change. And that could come as a disappointment for many party workers who blame the Gandhis for Congress's defeats in 2 consecutive federal elections. But eventually, it could result in the rise of a united opposition front, one that voters say has been practically absent from India's political system since Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to power in 2014.
And of course, the biggest challenge facing all India's opposition parties is Narendra Modi's popularity. For Congress, the clock is now ticking to prove that it has the capacity to challenge the Prime Minister in the minds of the public between now and the next Indian election. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denzelo reporting.
Saying that he has no idea what to make of the mixed signals, area man Pete Summers told reporters today he keeps getting ambiguous text messages from local woman Haley Mueller, claiming that she's not at all interested in him.
One minute she's like, I don't want to go out with you. And then she'll mention how she has to go hang out with her boyfriend. I mean, what am I supposed to do with that?
Summers, who first met Mueller at a friend's party last month, informed reporters that the 27-year-old's increasingly perplexing text messages have left him unable to ascertain whether or not she would want to date him. He also noted that Mueller's behavior at social gatherings was equally vague.
Last weekend, we were at a party, and every time I would go up to her, she just said, "Leave me alone." Then I text her the next day, and she totally doesn't even respond. I mean, she just needs to make up her mind and tell me what she wants. She hasn't answered my last 3 phone calls, so maybe I should go over there and make sure everything's okay.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. Welcome to the program. The phones are open, and you can join us here. Bring up whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here in the studio tonight, it's Ian.
And Reed Coverdale.
Phones are open. You can bring up anything. We're going to get into various different aspects that you might find interesting in the news. Story that broke yesterday, but we didn't get to it on the air, is that Vladimir Putin has now called for martial law in the eastern portion of Ukraine, the areas in which they are now declaring as Russia. He's now declaring martial law for that. We can get into that story here because I know, Reed, you do tend to pay some more attention probably than the average person to international goings-on. But you've been pretty busy over the last few days going and doing the politics thing, hanging around icky politicians like Don Bolduc. He's the right-wing, quote-unquote, Trumper or something that's running here in New Hampshire for U.S. Senate against the current incumbent, who's also bad. You know, they're all bad, Democrats, Republicans. There's a decent person running as a libertarian, Jeremy Kauffman, and we've talked about some of his really creative advertising that he's been doing that has been getting a lot of shares on the internet. Unfortunately, it hasn't persuaded anyone in the mainstream media to give him any kind of fair level of attention. And so I presume that was what drove you to go and attend a Don Bolduc event. Plus, Tulsi, your old pal, was in town. You used to be a Tulsi fan, and then you kind of changed your mind. Why don't you take us back to when you were like behind Tulsi some years ago, and what happened? What your evolution was from there?
Yeah, well, I don't think there was much of. There's been a little bit of an evolution, but I was a Rand Paul supporter in 2016. And that kind of turned me into more or less of a libertarian.
Were you a Ron Paul libertarian before Rand?
Just missed it.
Oh, okay.
I was in high school senior year when Ron Paul was running in 2012. And I remember liking him just because he seemed like a down-to-earth straight shooter. But it was like a couple years after his run, I started thinking about all the stuff he said and, kind of internalizing the libertarian message.
How would you have described yourself in 2012?
Oh, 2012, I was barely starting to snap out of it. But in high school, I was a total neocon.
Okay.
My parents actually were anti-war conservatives, but when I was in high school, I was trying to just reestablish myself in some strong conservative evangelical roots or something, and I was a huge Mike Huckabee fan in middle school, and then early high school I was listening to Ann Coulter, and she's gotten a little less awful lately, but back then she was just absolutely
the
terrible.
Republicans always get a little less awful when they're out of power, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I was just absolutely terrible. But then Ron Paul kind of snapped me out of it a little bit because I started rewatching all the debate moments in like 2014 after the election was already over, and then I started paying attention to his son, and then I got way into his run for president, and that was just disappointing.
Yeah, wasn't he the first to bail out? Like he was the first candidate to just call it quits.
The first one who made it on the debate stage at least. So he bailed, and then I voted for Gary Johnson, kind of not very excitedly. I wasn't a huge fan, but
I definitely wasn't excited by him either time.
Yeah, so I was already a libertarian, but I was just kind of done with presidential politics after that. And then Tulsi, I definitely disagreed with her on a number of issues, but she was the only one who was criticizing Trump for his foreign policy. Like the rest of them, all their complaints were like, oh, he's a white supremacist or he's a blah. There's just like dumb stuff. But she was criticizing him for his Iran policy, his giving the Saudis all sorts of weapons and building us up toward a nuclear arms race with China and Russia. So I was like, okay, that I can get behind. So I campaigned for her here in New Hampshire.
This was 2020.
2019, 2020, all the way till February. And then she obviously didn't do well. She came in like 7th place. Right. But that was how that was my involvement
Turns
with her.
out Democrats love war too these days.
A lot. To me, they always have. Like people are always like, what happened to the Democrat Party? And I'm like, what do you mean? They got us into World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Libya, Syria, Yemen, like all of them.
So the Democrats, like the Republicans sound pro-liberty when the Democrats are in office, the Democrats sound anti-war when the Republicans are in office.
Yeah.
Right?
Unless it's Trump, like this even though Trump was awful on foreign policy, he was called a Putin asset or, for like not wanting to escalate things to a crazy amount in Syria. And he was giving the Ukrainians weapons and, tons of money, and they're still calling him a Russian asset. I was just like, what are you guys talking about? This doesn't make any sense.
Well, I'll give Trump a little bit of credit. He seemed to be, and this isn't saying a whole lot, considering who he's compared to, but he seemed to be less warmongering than his recent predecessors, Obama, Clinton, George Bush. He didn't do as much. He did withdraw some troops from Afghanistan. He didn't get crazy and like start new conflicts generally, and even some things like he even tried to make peace with North Korea. That was to me like shocking. No one has ever tried that, and since that hasn't happened at all either.
Yeah, I was actually talking about that in a live stream I did today because I was very critical of Trump in 2016. Because he said some good things here and there, but I was like, man, this guy's insane, some of the stuff he says. But then he got in there and I realized, oh, he's just like every other president. But then the stuff with Korea happened, and I don't know if everyone remembers, but we thought we were on the brink of war with Korea 1 week, and then the next,
remember he called him Little Rocket Man or something.
Like saying we will rain down, hellfire upon you or whatever and make, destroy you. And then like a week later, they were meeting each other.
Hanging out, having dinner.
And I was like, this is amazing. I can't believe this is happening. And to me, it was the best thing he'd ever done.
I agree. Yeah.
During his presidency.
I think that's true.
He got dragged through the mud for it by the media. They were just like, oh, he's a dictator lover. And I was just like, what are you talking about? This is the best thing he's done.
They were so incensed that he dared to just talk to this guy.
Yeah.
Which had never happened in the history of North Korea ever since Kim Jong, what was it? Not Un or Il. The guy before him, the grandfather, Kim Il Sung. That was his name. The godhead basically of North Korea. Ever since that guy, created North Korea, essentially, the U.S. has just kept as far away from there as possible. And so just, he deserves credit for that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But all that to say, like, she was the only one who was to our side of him on foreign policy.
Yeah.
Like everybody else was just awful. So campaign for her. And then, she obviously ended up endorsing him in the end. And then since then, like, I just kind of...
Who did she endorse?
Biden.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, that pronoun wasn't very descriptive. But, ever since that, like, she occasionally says stuff I like and then says stuff I don't. I mean, it's just kind of hit or miss. Like,
Well, she has no principle.
Yeah. Right? I mean, I really think that's what it is. Like,
and she's not really anti-war from what I recall correct. Like, if I'm recalling correctly, she is like anti this war or anti that war or critical in her own way. But ultimately, she would never come right out and say, oh, well, I would never support a war. She would in many circumstances.
Oh, yeah. No, she's anti-regime change war, anti-stupid war. So she doesn't want to go to war with Russia or China or Iran or Syria, which already makes her better than 95% of Congress. But
socially, she's pretty hard left.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Or I mean, I don't even know anymore. She's
well now. She's moving the deck chairs around. She's changing her perspective. She came out in a pro-gun video recently where she's running around shooting things at a gun range, and she seems to be trying to pander to the right. As she then, like the day after or 2 days after the gun video came out, all of a sudden she renounces the Democratic Party. And she hasn't said she's going to become a Republican. I don't think she's said anything about what her next step is going to be. So for now, she's independent, Tulsi Gabbard. But now she's palling around with this guy here in New Hampshire, Don Bolduc, who's a former military, I guess still, I guess once you're a general, you're always a general. But he's a military general. He's like a retired general guy. And this guy is not a peace dude. He's not anti-war in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, not even slightly. He's a neocon, and I try not to, libertarians use that to describe everyone, and I really try not to, but he really is. He wants war with every country, and he's always angry that we haven't done enough and been aggressive enough.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find the clip, because there was one that was floating around a few days ago that really made it clear, because some people are trying to claim that, oh yeah, he's anti-war, you libertarians should get behind him. And so what is Tulsi Gabbard doing as her at least semi-anti-war stance, backing this guy? There's more coming up here in moments. You went to a campaign appearance. We'll talk about that coming up too.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Inflation, a sidelined labor force, and ever-increasing interest rates. It's the perfect storm for pushing the U.S. economy over the edge. Savvy investors are diversifying into gold and silver with BullionMax.com. You can buy direct from BullionMax.com without talking to a salesperson, and your precious metals will ship fully insured directly to your home. Free Talk Live listeners can now order one of BullionMax's most popular products, the Goldback. Now in stock, but supplies are going fast. To get your Goldbacks, go to BullionMax.com/FTL.
I'm crazy about My Magic Mud. This is the most important oral care product created this millennium, and I'm not kidding. We all have different opinions on politics and issues, but we all have mouths. And I want yours to be as clean as possible, with teeth as bright as they were meant to be. I will never be without My Magic Mud. It's a little surprising, but man, does it work. If you only listen to one thing I say ever, go to mymagicmud.com and get 20% off with code FTL. mymagicmud.com, code FTL.
Email is easy, instant, and free, and that can be real embarrassing. Email lacks the eye contact and body language you get in face-to-face conversation, or the tone of voice and other nuance you hear in a telephone conversation. Email is just words, often few words. We're all smothering in spam, so we often reply in terse fashion that's easy to misunderstand. And email doesn't cost you a postage stamp, and it lacks the deliberation time it'd take to walk to the snail mail box. So it's easy to succumb to the "oh yeah" stimulus response trap. When in doubt, don't snap back at snippy messages you get. You may have mistaken the sender's intent. And unless you're sending AOL to AOL, there's no unsend. For more tips on critical communication skills for the way things are now, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show here and bring up whatever you want. We're talking about warmongering, Democrats and Republicans, and the confusing, hypocritical Tulsi Gabbard, who came out a few days ago, and maybe several days ago at this point, and announced that she is no longer a Democrat. And to her credit, the things she said when she was announcing that she was no longer a Democrat sounded pretty good. Mm-hmm. Like she was calling them out for being warmongers and that sort of thing. I don't have the exact quote, but I think she might have even used that term.
Yeah, she did. She called them an elitist cabal of warmongers.
Yeah.
Which is pretty accurate.
Yeah, I can't disagree with her there. But then, like, within 48 hours, she's standing on a stage
with an elitist cabalist warmonger.
Yeah. So a former U.S. general who's running for Senate here in New Hampshire. We'll continue the discussion, but also I want to make sure you know about Bullion Max. Right now, you can go and get a free gold back when you buy the Bullion Max introduction. They've got this thing we were telling you about before. It's like a starter kit, the silver starter kit that you can get at employee pricing, and they're throwing in a free gold back with this as well. So you already had a pretty great deal on just the 5 ounces of silver that you get with this, but you also get the gold back. So if you've never had a gold back before, you've heard us talking a lot about them here. It's a perfect excuse to they just throw it in basically to your silver starter kit, so you can get an idea of the quality and the just beauty of the gold backs. So check it out at bullionmax.com/FTL. If you don't know what the gold backs are, they're beautiful interchangeable gold money that you can actually carry in your wallet. And I do this. I bring gold backs everywhere I go. I love to add them to a good cash tip for servers and that sort of thing, and it's fun to ask local businesses if they're willing to accept it. And of course, that always starts a conversation about real money, and they're just a wonderful outreach tool, and they're actually really widely valued at freedom-friendly businesses. So go to bullionmax.com/FTL. You can buy direct from Bullion Max without talking to a salesperson, and your precious metals will ship fully insured directly to your home. So you can get all kinds of great gold and silver products there. But if you've never gotten into silver or gold before, start with the silver starter kit at bullionmax.com/FTL. As we continue here, it's Ian and Reed in the studio. Reed, we were just kind of recapping what's been going on with this Tulsi Gabbard, who has been partially anti-war. Her rhetoric tends to be mostly decent. You know, when she's opposing the status quo, she talks pretty good against the current warmongering state. We won't go so far as to call her principled in this way or anything like that, but as far as national characters are concerned, she is one of the better sounding ones on, at the very least, this one issue.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said in the last segment, just not wanting to go into all-out hot war with other nuclear powers and major countries puts her at the top 5%
right
when she was in Congress. So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty slim pickings.
So then she announces last week or whenever it was, fairly recently, that she's no longer going to be a Democrat. She came out against the warmongering left and didn't say she was going to join the Republicans, which, of course, they're full of warmongers as well. And then strangely decides to team up with this general, this Don Bolduc. And, you know, normally I don't want to talk really much about New Hampshire elections because I think most people don't care about them. But Tulsi's kind of this national figure, so it's kind of interesting seeing what she's doing here. And people are claiming this Don Bolduc guy was cozying up to the Libertarians as he was trying to get through the primary here in New Hampshire. And sadly, he beat Bruce Fenton, who was an actual free stater, an actual like principled anti-war, pro-liberty guy. Bruce, unfortunately, it was his first run for any kind of office, and he went big, right? Like when you run for office the first time, you don't go for U.S. Senate, but he did, and you know he kind of jumped into the deep end, and he had an amazing campaign. I think he said he put like 85 Bitcoin into his campaign, which is some number of millions of dollars. And, you know, he had a lot of signage and had a lot of great appearances. Surprisingly, the media actually talked to him, which was really the best part about his campaign, was he ended up in debates with people like this. But he didn't make it past 5%, unfortunately. So Bolduc took the day, and he's now the Republican candidate for Senate here in New Hampshire. And so they're trying to cozy up to the Libertarians to try to, you know, court their vote because they know that the incumbent is she's tough to beat, right? Like she's a former governor here in New Hampshire. She's been in this position for at least 6 years, I think, at this point. After she was done with governor, she went and she ran for, I believe she ran for U.S. Senate at that point. And so, you know, she's going to be tough to unseat. And so they know they gotta get the Libertarians to not support the Libertarian and support Don Bolduc. So they were trying to, you know, get cozy with them. And I don't know how the message got out that this guy was in any way, shape, or form anti-war, because all you have to do is just listen to what he has to say. And you've got a clip here that was posted on the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire Twitter, which, by the way, is now the #1 state Libertarian Party Twitter out there.
That's right.
So that's kind of a good little trophy. But I'm going to go ahead and play this clip. It's him being interviewed on Fox News about the Ukraine-Russia situation. I don't know what.
February 28th.
Thank you. February was when this happened. So before Russia's invasion, we go here with the clip.
It's this resistance that's going to win. But what boggles my mind, Steve, is the fact that we haven't gone all in on this already.
Whoa. Okay. Well, we don't really need to play more than 7 seconds here. I mean, there's more to it, and we will. But that's, I mean, what more do you need to know about this guy? He wants to go, quote unquote, all in. That sounds like a full-on U.S. occupation and full-on, as you described it, hot war with Russia.
Yeah. So
in
this
the Ukrainian
is
territory.
Right. I forget what day Russia invaded, but it was
early March, I think. Right?
No, it was the end of February.
Oh, okay.
So it was like right before this clip. So these are his natural instincts. This guy's a general too. People got to remember he's not a farmer or a truck driver or some guy who doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a general, and he knows he's going on Fox News to talk about this. So it's not like this was an off-guard comment that he made at a town hall on a subject he doesn't know anything about. Like this is
he thought about this in advance.
Sure.
And that's the other thing. People that have been in the military will tell you that the generals, these high-level ranks, these are politicians.
Yeah.
They get to their positions by playing politics within the U.S. military. You know, this guy probably didn't work his way up from a grunt.
Right.
But even if he did, it doesn't matter because you have to play politics to get that high. So he's a politician first and foremost. Let me go on with more of this clip.
Diplomatically, informationally, militarily, and economically. This is not a time for pause right now. We need to get in there, and we need to help them on the ground.
Just pause it for a second. this is not a time for pause right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, his instinct is go, yeah. get him. You know?
Right. And as he said, he meant militarily, economically, all of the things that you could possibly do. Don't think about it. Just do it. Drop some bombs, kill some people, occupy the territory. Let's have another 20-year war.
Yep.
We have columns of his troops lined up, ready to be, interdicted. And we need to give that kind of help to the Ukrainians.
Let's pause it again. So we have columns of his troops lined up. He's talking
ready to be interdicted. That means let's drop some bombs on them.
Yeah, he's talking about Putin's troops. You got all the tanks and infantry and artillery all lined up. Let's airstrike them. That's what he's saying.
Yep.
That's insane.
Absolutely what he's saying. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Sadly, his viewpoint is probably fairly well represented amongst the mainstream Republicans and Democrats. So we're going to continue here. And then this woman, Tulsi Gabbard, shows up at this guy's campaign event. After talking out against the warmongers, she backs this person.
And still talking against it while backing him.
More coming up here in moments. You can join us here on Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
But we have the opportunity. No one has the opportunity.
Look, just hold on. Just because the slaves can pick the head slave doesn't mean that the slaves are free.
Oh, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Look, if people actually got up and voted for things, there might actually be some change.
People do actually get up and vote for things, and change always results in the same crap.
What are you going to do that's different by voting?
Two choices between crap sandwiches, man.
You're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. On the one hand, you're saying, hardly anybody votes, so you can barely say this is a person of right. And then I say, well, gosh, if people get up and vote, maybe things will change.
Hold on, that was only one thing he brought up.
Here's what I mean.
When people do vote, it doesn't make any difference because of a number of reasons.
People never vote in numbers that could actually reflect what
Why should I vote for any of these thugs? They're killers. They're murderers.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern. Live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. Liz Truss's resignation from her role as UK Prime Minister has sparked speculation over who will take her place. It's understood that former PM Boris Johnson is among those considering a leadership run. Ollie Barrett has more from London on Truss's position and when a new Prime Minister will be in Downing Street.
We are being told by the Conservative Party's 1922 committee, which organises the leadership process, that it will all be done and dusted in a week. So Liz Truss only has a few more days in Downing Street, but for that period she remains Prime Minister. She told us in that speech outside Downing Street earlier that she had already rung King Charles to tell him that she was resigning as Conservative Party leader, but she remains as Prime Minister until the next Conservative Party leader is in place, and that person then becomes the next Prime Minister.
European Union leaders are gathering in Brussels for 2 days of talks on tackling the bloc's deepening energy crisis. The EU used to rely on Moscow for around 40% of its natural gas imports. But after months of seeking out new suppliers, slashing consumption and boosting renewables, they're much less dependent on Russia. But gas prices remain sky high, and citizens and businesses are asking their governments for answers. Our reporter Rosie Burchard is at the talks in Brussels.
At least 15 countries, including Italy, Greece and Poland, well, they want big market interventions like capping gas prices. Meanwhile, Germany, the Netherlands and some others warn that that could simply cause suppliers to sell their gas elsewhere at a higher price. Now, they all agree something has to be done because the fallout of the war in Ukraine is really increasingly being felt here, and governments know they need to keep the public on side as they pledge to keep up support to Kyiv for as long as it takes.
An American woman's admitted responsibility for the death of a British teenager in a case that's caused a diplomatic row between the US and UK governments. 19-year-old Harry Dunn was killed in a crash outside a US military base in England in 2019. Our US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
Anne Sakoulis had turned out of RAF Croughton in Northamptonshire and driven on the wrong side of the road for over 20 seconds before she hit Harry Dunn, who was riding his motorbike on the correct side of the road. She had diplomatic immunity asserted on her behalf by the US administration and left the UK 19 days later. An extradition request for her to be brought to the UK was rejected by the US government, causing tension between the two countries. The guilty plea from Ms. Sakoulis brings a legal resolution to the Dunn family.
An alliance of leading NGOs in Africa says 58 million people are in urgent need of food aid in Central and Western Africa. More than half of the people facing a hunger crisis are living in Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. From bureaus worldwide, this is it.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, phones are open. You can join the show if you want to comment. We're talking about warmongers. There's, I'm sure, a bunch of them running for office this year, probably almost everyone except for the libertarians. But then there's Tulsi Gabbard, who has spoken out at least against some wars. And compared to most people in the federal government, she's kind of pro-peace by comparison to the total warring state.
Comparison to the war state, she's really pro-peace.
Right.
Yeah.
Yet then she teams up with this ultra warmongering character named General Don Bolduc. And we have a little bit more of the clip here when he was interviewed on Fox News right around the time that Russia invaded Ukraine. And his comments were essentially that he doesn't think anybody should wait, that they should go, and the U.S. government military should go in full on, essentially, into a hot war with Russia. And we're going to continue with that clip here in a moment. But also, I do want to make sure that you know about Bitcoin.com, because Bitcoin.com can help you learn about cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. And there is a little bit of a learning curve. I mean, there's no doubt that crypto adoption has gotten easier in the last roughly 14 years that Bitcoin has been around. It was really hard to do, 10 or 11 years ago, but now it's pretty simple. But there's still some things you should, some concepts that you should get under your belt, and Bitcoin.com can help you with that. Just click Get Started at the top of the page, and you'll find some introductory information there. Bitcoin.com can also help you buy your first cryptocurrencies, and don't forget, you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin, because hardly anyone could. They're like $19,000 per Bitcoin, but you can buy 1% or less if you want to. It's really just up to you. But you really ought to learn the basics first, so click Get Started at the top of the page on Bitcoin.com. You can watch some introductory videos there, and you can also check out their news site as well. They got all kinds of cool features. Go to news.bitcoin.com for the latest news headlines in the world of cryptocurrency. All right, so we got more here with this a-hole, General Don Bolduc, who has been trying to cozy up with libertarians here in New Hampshire because he's desperate for, getting as many votes as he can. He knows that Jeremy Kauffman, the libertarian candidate, may very well be the difference between him and this other person running the incumbent, Maggie Hassan. And so he's trying to do everything he can, but luckily he went on Fox News most of a year ago and started going crazy with pro-war, warmongering statements, and we're going to continue with some of those here. And then we'll talk about you showing up, Reed, at one of his events, more than one, apparently, within the last few days with some other libertarians here in New Hampshire. But here's more of the clip.
We're just sitting back and we're not doing anything, and we're just saying, everything is on the table. Well, now's the time. Putin is a global threat. He is an enemy to the world, and that's what we have to start telling people he is. And we can't take any...
Do you believe that?
A threat to the world?
Yeah.
No. I mean...
But he's big. He's got nuclear weapons. I mean, he's scary.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I realize NATO and the United States have pumped a ton of weapons and money into Ukraine, but even so, I mean, he can barely take eastern Ukraine, at least at the rate that he's going. I mean, he's probably not going as hard as he could, but still... I mean, it's a massive chore for him to take just eastern Ukraine.
Right, they're having to call up the reserves.
Yeah.
I believe their plan was to call up at least 200,000 reservists.
Right. So the idea that if we don't stop him here, he's going to end up on our doorstep, it's laughable. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I mean, to us it's laughable, but this is the old claim, right? It's like, if we don't get involved and preemptively strike, then, America's freedom is going to go away.
It's the thing they said about terrorists. If we don't fight them over there, we'll fight them over here. It's literally the same thing.
Same kind of fear-mongering.
And I mean, if people knew some of this stuff, like the guys who wrote Project for New American Century, they ended up being I think it's the Foreign Policy Institute that pushed for all this Cold War mongering with Russia. They're the same guys who pushed for the Iraq War, and then they were the architects of pushing for the this war we're having with Russia now. So same people, same strategy.
The proxy war that is being had right now. We're going to continue here with more of this clip because there's plenty more this a-hole has to say.
Pressure off China either. We got to go after China because they're in this with them.
Oh, okay. Let's just spread the international conflict to the other big bad out there, the other nuclear power that's...
This conversation had nothing to do with China. They had him on to talk about Russia, and he says, oh, by the way, we also have to go after China so they don't go after Taiwan. Like, dude...
I mean, it was bad enough to see what happened with the supply chain during COVID when a lot of Chinese factories shut down. They weren't producing what they would normally produce. I'm pretty sure there are still some issues with products coming from China in a quick manner. But if you go to war with China, that's all going to end.
Yeah.
Like whatever the good things are that we get from China, and there's a lot of them, right? Like it's not all crap anymore. It used to be, Chinese products bad, all of them are junk or whatever. That's not true anymore. China had in the last few decades, they had actually a lot of economic growth over there because I think it was the guy before the current president was kind of a little more hands off, if I recall what I've heard about China, and they kind of let the middle class grow and let people own more stuff and businesses open, and the quality level of Chinese products got a lot better. And so a lot of businesses are relying on these products now. And to just say, we just need to go to war is completely economically, beyond the whole war, human extinction, it's completely economically tone deaf as well.
Yeah, well, think about how much just sanctioning Russia has affected our energy prices and everything.
It's only just starting, too.
Yeah. I mean, think of how much more reliant on China we are compared to Russia, and how ridiculous. I mean, especially if the war is still going on with Russia and we're still at odds with Russia, and then we also get into it with China.
2 fronts.
Yeah.
I mean, literally half the world at that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge, not people-wise, but it's a lot of landmass.
Yes.
That's for sure. And there's a lot of people in China, way more than Russia. I mean, there's, what is it, more than 1 billion people, I think, in China?
There's around 1 billion people,
And Russia's 144 million. So, I mean... Anyway, we continue here more with this psychopath.
We don't want them going into Taiwan. So this is huge, and we got to come together. We got to lead the world.
No, we really don't. We really don't. And Switzerland, of course, has proved this for I don't know how many decades or whatever. Well, how long has their position in Switzerland been to be neutral?
A long time.
Stay neutral.
Yeah.
And they've proven that you don't need to get involved in any of these conflicts, and that it used to be sort of the whole founding fathers' vision was to stay out of this stuff,
right?
To not get involved in entangling conflicts. I believe that was that Washington or Jefferson? It was one of those originals. They got it. They understood that, and that's been lost for a long time, ever since at least World War I. We go on
in supporting President Zelensky and supporting the Ukrainians, and what we have been doing now is just standing by. There is more to do. We can do it, and we should be doing it.
So let's just be really clear what you mean there. Again, limited time, so I'm sure it can't be an exhaustive answer.
Right.
But what specifically? You're not talking about American troops. I think everyone's agreed about that. How can we help specifically? No. What should we do that we're not doing?
We have indirect fires. Oh, sure, Steve. We have indirect fires. We have indirect capabilities. So does NATO. We have all kinds of things that we can be helping with without having to put ground troops in there. And that's what he's asking for. And we have to get more stuff in there. And
okay, so he kind of backtracked there when the host clarified, kind of led him into this question instead of the very beginning. He's just, let's throw it all in, let's go in hot conflict, let's fight it out with Putin. Now he sounds like he's backtracked it slightly by acknowledging, we don't want to send our troops in there, but there's all these other things we can do.
Well, he says he doesn't want to send ground troops in, like infantry,
right?
But then
airstrikes.
Yeah, but then he's fine with indirect fires and sending in special operations and CIA. So he doesn't want to send the army in, but he's willing to fire directly upon Russian troops.
Well, I suspect the CIA is still there, right? Like,
they've been spotted there.
Right. Well,
several times
they said that it was the CIA, or it has been said that the CIA was what set up this current government there in 2014.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Right? So why would they have left?
No, they wouldn't.
They're still there doing their thing. The number here is 603-283-6160. They're probably the ones whispering in Zelensky's ear that, oh, you need to ban the opposition party. Keep them from
That's real democracy.
Yeah, keep them from even having a chance of being elected. The number here is 603-283-6160. More about this warmongering psychopath that now Tulsi Gabbard is buddies with and doing campaign appearances with. We'll get to that on the way here, and you can share your thoughts on Free Talk Live.
Hi, I'm Derek J. I don't want a politician to represent me. To me, government is the idea that one group of people can coerce everyone to comply with an edict or face increasing punishments up to and including death. Despite perhaps the most noble of intentions, the best government services are a far cry from what could be provided for by voluntary interactions. Besides, the people who call themselves the government wage wars and put peaceful people in jail for crimes involving no victims. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm. On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
Have you had enough of the big-name web hosting services that are long on promises but short on bleeding-edge features, uptime, and customer service? Try Agorist Hosting, the agile web host that offers full concierge service from website redesign, full e-commerce solutions, custom apps for your Shopify store, IPFS integration, and more. Agorist Hosting is ready to take your web presence into the future. To get started, head over to agoristhosting.com.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. I want to say thank you to Free Talk Live supporter JCOM3030. JCOM is a super high-level supporter. He's diamond level, which means he's doing way more than what we request. We only ask for $5 a month at the AMPS program, and JCOM's doing, I think, 10 times that amount. So thank you, JCOM, for the support there. You can join him, and like I said, it's only $5 a month to become one of our AMPs at amps.freetalklive.com. It stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. If you like what we do here on Free Talk Live and you want to help us perhaps be heard on more radio stations, to bring the ideas of liberty to more warmongering conservative radio stations, which tends to be where our show is heard, then you want to get behind us, please do that at amps.freetalklive.com. You can use your credit card, your debit card, your PayPal account, if you still have one of those, over at amps.freetalklive.com. Again, thanks to JCOM3030 for being one of those. Also, one of the perks you get is you get access to the AMP-only podcast, which has the full radio show every single night, but minus the recorded commercials. So you can get that as one of your perks at amps.freetalklive.com. So we've been playing some audio here going back to late February of this year with this character, Don Bolduc. He's a former general with the military. Was he an Army general? Do you know?
Yeah, Army, I think.
Army general. And he total warmonger. He wants to have like a full-on active conflict with not just Russia, he says, but also China. He wants to literally have a potential nuclear conflict with these mega superpowers, and it's just absolutely insane. But of course, that's what you would expect from somebody who's tied in with the military-industrial complex, right? Like more war means more money for his buddies.
Yeah, and if you go on his website, he also wants to go after rogue nations like North Korea and Iran.
Wow.
So even China and Russia's not enough. We got to go after all of them.
Nuts.
And then people try to say, well, he's softened on his position since he made these statements. But if you go and look at his websites and if you listen to his speeches, which I just did on Sunday, his only criticism of Biden is his lack of strategy. And if the lack of strategy is that Biden wouldn't, make indirect fire on Russian convoys or put special forces on the ground or whatever, because that's what he was criticizing Biden for back in February. And that he wouldn't, go hard enough and put enough sanctions on. That was all of his criticisms leading up to it. That's his only criticism of Biden. He hasn't suddenly said, oh, we need to de-escalate tensions. He's just said that there's no strategy with Biden, with Russia or China, that we need a strategy. And we've seen what his strategy looks like. So not a good idea.
We go on here. There's just a little bit more of a clip with him talking to Fox News earlier this year, and then we'll get into his appearance with Tulsi Gabbard. More than one of them.
We have to get more combat help in there. We can do that. I know we can do it. I've seen it done before.
Sorry to interrupt. What is combat? I'm sorry to interrupt you. What is combat help? Just so everyone's clear what you mean that's not troops.
Good question.
Sure. You got to get the resistance, the stuff that they need, but more importantly, we're going to have to help this resistance out. And I talked about this earlier with General Kellogg on Fox and Friends on an earlier program about CIA findings and about using special operations troops.
And that is the end of the clip. So, special operations troops. He doesn't get into what, we don't have the whole, I don't know how long this interview was, but Twitter restricts you to 2 minutes and 20 seconds. But I think he made it pretty clear what he wants to do.
Yeah. And then after this whole segment, Corey Lewandowski, who's a Trump advisor, and the what's her name? Let me find it here. And then Jennifer Griffin, who's the Pentagon correspondent for Fox News. She had to go on the record and say that his statements are so crazy and so wild and do not represent the Department of Defense or the Pentagon in any way. And if we actually were to put special forces on the ground or to fire upon Russian troops, that would cause escalation that they don't want at all. And then Lewandowski, who's a former Trump advisor, he said this should disqualify Bolduc from ever being a U.S. senator.
Wow.
So when the Pentagon and a Trump advisor are
extreme.
both like, whoa, dude, chill out a little bit, it's bad.
Yeah, it is. So this guy somehow teams up with Tulsi Gabbard after her statements about the warmongering, left and why she's leaving the Democratic Party. What is going on there? I mean, as somebody who, not that you can get into her head, but I mean, do you want to speculate as to why she thinks teaming up with this character is going to somehow benefit her image?
Yeah, man, I don't get this one. I mean, she endorsed a bunch of people, like Blake Masters, I think she endorsed out in Arizona, and I got all sorts of issues with him, but at least...
Another Republican.
Yeah, but at least in that race, you've got Mark Kelly, who's like the worst Democrat in the Senate.
The incumbent?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he's just so bad, and Blake Masters is still pretty bad, but he's not as bad as Kelly, where here... You know, Maggie Hassan is
not... And there's
a
libertarian in that race, too, as I understand.
Yeah. Mark Victor.
Right. Well-known, long-time libertarian.
Yeah, he's doing very well in the polls, I think.
Okay, good.
But then out here, Maggie Hassan is bad, but she's not some unique evil by any stretch. I mean, she's just
your typical evil.
She's just a typical Democrat. Yeah. And he is worse than her, I think, on this issue.
Sounds like it.
I mean, because I don't know that this is true, but I don't believe Maggie Hassan has ever been corrected by the Pentagon.
Probably not.
Saying that's a little too crazy, Maggie. I mean, she has supported everything, you know, including the $40 billion to Ukraine.
Sure,
said,
whatever
like,
Biden wants,
we
she's going to
need
do
a
it.
bipartisan support of Ukraine, blah, 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 whatever. So she's awful. But I don't think she's said anything that crazy, like we need to fire on Russian troops or whatever. So... Yeah, I'm lost. I don't get this. I don't know if they're friends. I mean, she spent a lot of time here in New Hampshire.
She was in the military, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or still is.
She's still in the military,
yeah. She's like in the psychological operations section.
Yeah.
That's like the
Since
the
2020
head games unit, right?
I think so, yeah.
So she goes to this guy's events, comes all the way up. She lives in Hawaii, I think, right?
Correct.
She comes all the way up here to New Hampshire to campaign for this character. You and some other libertarians showed up. What was it, a few days ago in Manchester, I think?
On Sunday in Brentwood. So there was a town hall that was advertised.
They've been going all over, though.
Yeah. And I had been to a Baltic event a couple weeks prior in Keene, and I actually sat down next to his wife, who was a very nice woman, and talked with her. And I had actually tried to get him on the podcast because I asked her if I could get him on, and she said, yeah, I'll see if he'll do it. And then I got in touch with the media team, and they just kind of blew me off for like a week. And then finally they called me and said, hey, we don't have time to do this.
I'm surprised they called you.
They did.
Yeah.
I'll give them that much.
Okay.
And so my thought was, okay, I'm just going to have to...
They researched you, you know.
I think they did. But my thought was, okay, if I want to ask him any questions, I've just got to go to one of his town halls and hopefully get called on and then ask him one of these questions.
Sure.
And so then we find out Tulsi endorses him, and she's coming here, and she's going to, campaign with him. So we decided, okay, how about Sunday? As many of us who can will go to one of these town halls, and we weren't planning to disrupt it in any way, but we were planning to ask questions, and hopefully multiple of us would get to ask similar questions.
I mean, if you've got, the town halls in New Hampshire tend to be pretty intimate. There's probably, I'm just going to guess there probably weren't more than a couple hundred people at this.
There were a lot at this one. There were probably 400 or so.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty big. That's pretty big.
It was big.
But the more people you can get in there, the odds are increased that one of them's going to get called on. Unless the whole question and answer is completely controlled from top to bottom and they're only talking to plants and pre-screened questioners.
Which... To Tulsi Gabbard's credit, when I was on her campaign, she would always answer any question asked, and she'd never cut anyone off, even if they were going on for like 3 or 4 minutes asking a question.
Okay.
So I will give her that. So I figured, okay, this isn't her campaign, it's Baltic, so it might be completely different, but if anything is the same, then they'll definitely ask questions. So anyway, like 12 of us, I think, got together about an hour before the event, and we went over and started trickling in and sat in different seats to try to not make everything super obvious. And the campaign, I think he's the campaign manager, recognized some of us, and he came and sat down next to me. I've never met him before that I know of, but
this was after you'd already asked if you could interview him?
Yes, but I'd never talked to this guy before, so I don't know if he knew who I was, but he might have. Anyway, he came and sat down next to me, and he said, look, we're glad you're here, but we're not going to tolerate any disruptions. And so I honestly replied, I'm not here to make a disruption. I'm just here to ask questions. And he said, okay, well, there will be a Q&A after the speaking part is done. So, we don't want any outbursts while they're speaking. And I said, well, that's not the plan. And so we
And
sat.
were there any?
Were there what?
Were there any outbursts?
No,
Okay.
not until afterward.
We're going to
But sure, we'll
continue
get into
with the
that.
story. You'll tell more about what happened there
Yeah.
with Tulsi Gabbard, the supposedly kind of anti-war politician who's now teamed up with a full-on pro-war psychopathic general. It's nuts. There's more coming up here, and you can join us on Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is on the way.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. Liz Truss's resignation from her role as UK Prime Minister has sparked speculation over who will take her place. It's understood that former PM Boris Johnson is among those considering a leadership run. Ollie Barrett has more from London on Truss's position and when a new Prime Minister will be in Downing Street.
We are being told by the Conservative Party's 1922 committee, which organises the leadership process, that it will all be done and dusted in a week. So Liz Truss only has a few more days in Downing Street, but for that period she remains Prime Minister. She told us in that speech outside Downing Street earlier that she had already rung King Charles to tell him that she was resigning as Conservative Party leader, but she remains as Prime Minister until the next Conservative Party leader is in place, and that person then becomes the next Prime Minister.
European Union leaders are gathering in Brussels for 2 days of talks on tackling the bloc's deepening energy crisis. The EU used to rely on Moscow for around 40% of its natural gas imports. But after months of seeking out new suppliers, slashing consumption and boosting renewables, they're much less dependent on Russia. But gas prices remain sky high, and citizens and businesses are asking their governments for answers. Our reporter Rosie Burchard is at the talks in Brussels.
At least 15 countries, including Italy, Greece and Poland, they want big market interventions like capping gas prices. Meanwhile, Germany, the Netherlands and some others warn that that could simply cause suppliers to sell their gas elsewhere at a higher price. Now, they all agree something has to be done because the fallout of the war in Ukraine is really increasingly being felt here, and governments know they need to keep the public on side as they pledge to keep up support to Kyiv for as long as it takes.
An American woman's admitted responsibility for the death of a British teenager in a case that's caused a diplomatic row between the US and UK governments. 19-year-old Harry Dunn was killed in a crash outside a US military base in England in 2019. Our US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
Anne Sakoulis had turned out of RAF Croughton in Northamptonshire and driven on the wrong side of the road for over 20 seconds before she hit Harry Dunn, who was riding his motorbike on the correct side of the road. She had diplomatic immunity asserted on her behalf by the US administration and left the UK 19 days later. An extradition request for her to be brought to the UK was rejected by the US government, causing tension between the two countries. The guilty plea from Ms. Sakoulis brings a legal resolution to the Dunn family.
An alliance of leading NGOs in Africa says 58 million people are in urgent need of food aid in Central and Western Africa. More than half of the people facing a hunger crisis are living in Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, updating you today on a story we covered earlier in the week. It is now official. India's opposition Congress party has a new leader. And for the first time in 24 years, he is not a member of the Gandhi family. Mallikarjun Kharge, 80 years old, now assumes the mantle at the helm of the Indian Congress party ahead of a tough election battle in 2025. FSN's Ishan Garg in our Delhi bureau has more.
Mallikarjun Kharge has been with the Congress party for nearly 3 decades now. He's considered an experienced leader and one who's close to the Gandhi family. He's promised reforms in the party, but analysts say his proximity to Sonia and Rahul Gandhi could mean that not much will change. And that could come as a disappointment for many party workers who blame the Gandhis for Congress's defeats in 2 consecutive federal elections. But eventually, it could result in the rise of a united opposition front, one that voters say has been practically absent from India's political system since Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to power in 2014.
And of course, the biggest challenge facing all India's opposition parties is Narendra Modi's popularity. For Congress, the clock is now ticking to prove that it has the capacity to challenge the Prime Minister in the minds of the public between now and the next Indian election. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denzelo reporting.
After years of weekly meetings with his psychologist, local man Chris Vaughn told reporters today he was excited to only have 2 sessions left before completely resolving all of his emotional issues and never having the need to return to another therapy session again.
When I started therapy, I knew if I could make it through exactly 120 50-minute sessions with Dr. Warner, then all of my issues with depression and crippling anxiety would be gone. Next week we're covering my parents. The week after that we're wrapping up my trust issues, and then I should be good to go.
According to Vaughn, it took 40 sessions alone to fully resolve his feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem resulting from an unhappy childhood. Vaughn's therapist, Dr. Susan Warner, told Onion reporters that she's pleased with her patient's progress and relieved that his long-time emotional and cognitive issues are nearly solved for good.
I told him that getting healthy would take at least 100 hours of therapy, and now he'll never have to see me again. Thank God for that. That guy was a real piece of work.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. We're kicking off the second hour of the program. Phones are open. You can join us here and bring up whatever is on your mind. With you tonight, it's Ian.
And Reed Coverdale.
Reed Coverdale, by the way, is the host of Naturalist Capitalist, and you can find that on Odyssey.
Yep.
Still probably on YouTube, but you don't want to go to YouTube. You want to go to Odyssey. You can actually find our channel there as well at video.freetalklive.com, and just in the search bar, just type in Naturalist Capitalist, and you will find Reed's channel there. You can subscribe to him. He's doing a couple shows, 2-3 shows a week. If you have time for it. You're pretty busy these days doing campaign appearances where you're trying to bird dog these candidates here in New Hampshire, for better or for worse. And so far they let you into one and then they banned you from another. We're just getting into that story, so we'll tell more of it here in a moment. But first, we have Major Payne on the line in Michigan. Go ahead, Major.
All right. You remember last night I called you guys and gave you a heads up on that 15-0 vote?
Yeah, the CDC had voted unanimously, apparently, to mandate that schools have to require the COVID vaccination. Is that right?
To be part of your school vaccines for kindergarten on up.
I presume that means for those schools that are accepting federal government funds, which of course is probably 100% of them, the government schools.
Right now, that's probably true. But DeSantis, evidently, they pushed some legislation through Florida, which, if the CDC does get their way and this thing is mandated, will make it null and void in Florida. And I guess there's a few other states that have this in the works. But as you stated, I would assume that means they're going to have to give up the federal purse strings.
I would presume so. And I hope that they move forward with that. I mean, DeSantis is a scumbag politician just like the rest. But, every now and then a scumbag politician is right about an issue. So if they're nullifying on this issue, then good for them.
He's been bucking the pony on this whole vaccination business the whole way, the lockdown and whatnot. I mean,
no, he wasn't doing that the whole way. I understand that's the mythology around him, but DeSantis locked down. DeSantis was in favor of masks for a time, and then he realized that it would be more popular if he would be against the masks, so he flipped.
I think the only place he locked down was that one giant old folks village. It's like 10 miles.
They locked down the whole state. There was a story early on about how the Florida Highway Patrol was literally blocking interstates.
Just trying to keep people from other states out, trying to keep everybody off the freeway.
Blocking people from coming into Florida. I remember reporting on that in March or whatever, March, April, somewhere in that range of 2020.
He still wasn't nowhere near as bad as Whitmer here in Michigan.
Sure, I'm sure you can compare evils, and you can say that he was a worse or a better cancer than the other 40 cancers or whatever. I mean, that's all we're talking about here. So what was your point about the CDC? You just wanted to, praise him for nullifying on this?
I just wanted to say that at least somebody's trying to stand up to these clowns, So, like you say, you got to take the good where you can find it. And
there's not a whole lot.
They might all be evil, but you'll survive a cold. You won't survive the plague. There's variances of evil. Later, Buck.
Thanks, Major. Appreciate it, man. The number here is 603-283-6160. I mean, what do you think about this DeSantis character? I mean, to me, it's pretty disappointing seeing so many libertarians falling under his spell. People who should know better.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment that he changed his tune with the wins.
Mm-hmm. That's what politicians do, right?
Yeah, and also he wasn't. I mean, people act like he was known as the guy who pushed back throughout the lockdowns.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know who he was until 2021.
Me too.
I mean,
I'm from Florida.
Yeah, there was no news about him in 2020, which was when the lockdowns were the most prevalent. It wasn't until 2021 when there was already political will to push back against all this stuff that he
becomes
decided,
a star.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, some of the stuff he's done, like when he won't send the National Guard to the State of the Union address and stuff like that, I love that type of stuff. It's just funny, and it gives the president a hard time or whatever. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, he's just another opportunist, and people who want him to run for president are insane. They've never looked at his congressional voting record. It's very, very bad.
Oh, is he a congressman? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, for 8 years, and it's awful. I mean, he's the worst of the worst.
Jeez, it doesn't surprise me at all.
I mean, he worked at Gitmo.
Whoa. Was he like an executive?
I forget what I think
ranking officer.
I forget what his job at Gitmo was.
Jeez.
But while he's been governor, he's been like the most anti-free speech governor.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not talking about like keeping pornography out of kindergarten or something. I mean, like, he's the most anti-BDS governor.
BDS?
BDS. So you're not allowed to boycott Israel. He's the most Zionist governor.
Mm-hmm.
He's super, super pro-police.
Yeah, he is. He is. He will. If there's a pro-cop bill, he's going to sign it. It doesn't matter what it is. He's created new policing agencies. I think they created a whole new elections police force in Florida now under him.
Yeah, I mean, and then the things that he's known for being good on, I think Kemp actually only locked his state down for like 2 weeks, where Florida did it for like 2 months, I think. So why is Kemp not the guy we're lauding praise on? Or, Kristi Noem, who didn't lock it down at all. I don't know.
Right.
So, I mean, even the stuff that we're supposed to love him for, I don't think he's the best on it. I think he just got the most attention for it.
Yeah, he's got press, and he's good at it. Right?
Yeah.
Like he knows how to work it, like you were saying, with the political actions of kind of trolling, essentially, politically, the Democrats. So, yeah, it disappoints me, too, seeing anybody who's supposedly pro-liberty getting, falling under this guy's spell and thinking, oh, Florida's the free state. I should move to Florida because of this one guy who's not even libertarian in the slightest. He changed his mind and he was right about this one issue.
Yeah.
And that's all we're talking about here.
I wrote a Substack called DeSantis, the Rights Obama. Because I look at them as two very similar figures. You had Barack Obama, who was right about one very important issue, and it's not to diminish the issue at all. It was the Iraq War, and he wanted to, he was against continuing the Iraq War. That's how he ran his campaign.
He also said he was against Guantanamo Bay.
Oh, yeah, he said all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But then, if you looked at his record before he was president, you could see that he wasn't going to be a good president, even on his junior senator voting record. You were like, whoa, this guy isn't going to be anti-war. He's not going to be pro-civil liberties. Right. And you have the same thing with DeSantis. He was good on this one issue. But if you look at his congressional voting record or even his gubernatorial voting record or, what he's done as governor.
He's an arch statist.
Yeah. So, people falling in love with someone over one important issue is it's never good.
So back to what we were talking about, which was Tulsi Gabbard, who had been noteworthy in her semi-anti-war stance, and at least anti-some wars, who has come out and left the Democratic Party, made a big deal about that, and good for her. The statements she made were fine when that came to what she did. But then she goes and she appears on the same stage and starts going on a tour with this General Don Bolduc, who's a psychopathic ex-general who is basically advocating for a hot conflict with both Russia, China, and even more of the big baddies all around the planet. And we played some of the clips earlier about that. You went to an event where they approached you. Apparently, the campaign manager approached you and sat next to you for a moment and told you, "Hey, you can be here, but we don't want you causing a ruckus." And you said you weren't there for that. You just wanted to ask a question. And he promised you there would be a Q&A. I think that's where we left the story off.
Yeah, so he promised us there would be a Q&A after they both spoke. And so I said, well, we don't have any intentions of speaking until then, or I didn't even say we. I just said I. I was just speaking for myself.
You can't speak for anyone else.
And he said, okay, well, there will be a Q&A. And so Tulsi came in and spoke.
Now, is it true she was 45 minutes late?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Which, having worked on her campaign,
believable?
That was kind of her MO. But she spoke for about 20 minutes, and then he spoke for about 20 minutes, and
wow, that's like blissfully short for a political speech.
It is.
I mean, normally politicians just drone on forever.
Yeah, they were the most empty speeches I'd listened to in a long time. I know Tulsi's speeches pretty well, and she can give like a really concise, good critical speech, but this was one of her like platitude.
Many words, but no real meaning.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to continue here because the Q&A, turns out that didn't happen. And so the confrontation had to happen out in the hallways, at least the way that's the footage looked. We'll talk about it coming up here, and you can share your thoughts on Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it! You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm. The Free State Project has reached its goal of 20,000 liberty lovers who've pledged to move to New Hampshire and get active to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Perhaps you're trying to figure out what part of New Hampshire should be your destination. If so, consider Keene. You'll find more than 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com. Keene is famous for its historic, publicity-generating activism, as well as being the liberty media capital of the world. It's home to freekeene.com, New Hampshire's destination for liberty activism, news, and opinion. For years, we've been compiling over 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com, where you'll learn about some of what's happening here and what makes Keene a great place to live. If you love liberty, you'll probably enjoy anywhere you end up in the Shire. But do your due diligence first. Please visit move.freekeene.com for the full list of over 150 reasons to move to Keene. That's move.freekeene.com. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join the show. You can bring up whatever you want. The number, 603-283-6160. We're talking about the contradiction, the glaring contradiction of Tulsi Gabbard, who says she's critical of war, especially like big, insane levels of war. And then she goes and she backs a guy for U.S. Senate named General Don Bolduc, who has just essentially been public with his beliefs about having the biggest possible war, the biggest possible conflict with Russia and China that the United States could. And so it's Ian and Reed here in the studio tonight. You can join us online anytime over at freetalklive.com and do enjoy the features that we have waiting for you on our website, including our social media platform. You can go and interact with other Free Talk Live listeners, as well as some of the hosts of the show on our platform that we run. It's on our server. And so, therefore, you have more freedom to express yourself without getting banned over at social.freetalklive.com. Once again, that's social.freetalklive.com. So, Reed, you were telling us about you and roughly a dozen libertarian activists went to this one of apparently many, a series of Tulsi/Bolduc events here in New Hampshire. Your intention was to spread amongst the audience, and then when the time came for question and answer, simply ask a tough question. You know, I think the term for this is bird dogging, where you corner a candidate in a place where they have pressure on them and they feel like they have to answer a question. Of course, as we've already pointed out, you can't trust a word that comes out of these people's mouths. They're going to say, like, even if you do get to ask the question you want to ask, they can say whatever they want. I mean, if they lie to you, there's no punishment for them. Yeah, you can hold their feet to the flames later if they get elected and they go and they do something opposite from what they say, but they're already elected at that point. It doesn't matter if they lied to you. But still, it is interesting to get it on the record and confront somebody with their hypocrisy or whatever. So what would you have asked had you actually been chosen to ask a question at the end of the speeches from Tulsi Gabbard and this psychopathic general?
Yeah, well, I was expecting they'd both be standing up there. And so I would say I campaigned for Tulsi in 2020 because even though I had some major policy disagreements with her, she put foreign policy at the forefront and said she wanted to end these stupid, wasteful wars. So why should I vote for you, General Baldock, because you want to wage stupid, wasteful wars? And then I had a copy of his transcript that we were playing earlier of his, on Fox News. And then Lewandowski saying that he should, not even be considered for U.S. Senate in the future, and the Pentagon saying that his inflammatory statements were too aggressive for them. So I was just going to put it right to him, like, what am I missing here? I mean, if I'm in the wrong here and I'm missing something obvious, please tell me what it is, but I don't understand this. And then a bunch of people were going to ask those same basic questions. And then the other thing we're going to ask, because Tulsi was kept out of the debates in the Democratic Party.
Okay.
They kept putting arbitrary rules to keep her from being allowed in.
Just like they're doing with Jeremy Coffin
exactly.
and Karlin Boroshenko here, the Libertarian candidates in New Hampshire.
Exactly. So that's what we were going to bring up. Do you think, just like you were disallowed to debate, even though you qualified, don't you think it's unfair that they're doing it to Libertarian candidates? And like you said, it doesn't matter what they say, but it would have been an interesting...
That seems like a pretty softball question anyways. Yeah, I mean,
sure.
Why wouldn't she say, yeah, that's unfair? I mean, even
of course,
Baldock has...
He's said it multiple times.
Yeah, even Baldock apparently has gone on record saying he thinks that they should allow Jeremy to debate. Jeremy Kaufman, the Libertarian candidate,
right.
Who is running against him. So if he gets any credit at all, it's for being willing to say that. But saying something isn't the same as doing something. And so Baldock has proven that he doesn't actually mean that, because if he actually meant it, because he claims he wants to debate. Apparently, Hassan's not debating him. Is that what's going on?
She did the other day.
Okay, so they are debating. So he claims he wants to have this debate. He claims he thinks that they should allow Jeremy into it. Well, all he had to do was say, yeah, I'm willing to debate WMUR, but you have to allow my competition in. This is not fair. And if you don't allow Jeremy Kaufman in to debate me, then I will not appear on your stage. And make a public statement about that. And that would push the TV station here, there's only like one in New Hampshire, but it would push WMUR, I think, in enough to where they would change their rules. And they would say, okay, well, if we don't do this, we're not going to have any debate. We want to have a debate. We want viewers, right? So, if one of the main two candidates refuses to debate, then they would be able to do it. Of course, then the counter might be, oh, well, Maggie Hassan's saying she won't debate if Jeremy's in, so who knows how that would go. But at the very least, he would be able to say he put his money where his mouth is. He put his actions where his words were. And so just saying.
Yeah, in fact, Jeremy was one of the libertarians that went to this event, and he was removed promptly.
Wow. Before it even started?
Before it even started.
Wow.
Which he said, Jeremy didn't think that was weird. He said, nah, whatever. It's kind of expected. But, I mean, if you do think anyone should be allowed to debate and anyone should have a platform, it is kind of weird to remove them when they're not causing a problem.
And they removed how many?
Him and Bill Barger, who was with him.
So you said you expected them both to be on the stage together, but that didn't happen?
Well, they were. So she spoke, and then he spoke, and then she got up on the stage with him, and we all figured, okay, this is when the Q&A is going to start. And then they both waved and just said, bye.
Oh, wow.
And they went off the stage and into a lobby nearby. So we all quickly gathered together, and we wanted to and we weren't going to do anything threatening or imposing, but we just all wanted to go up at once. Be like, hey, we're anti-war, and you were like better than everybody else in 2020 on the war stuff. So why are you
doing this?
Endorsing this guy?
Yeah.
Are we missing something here? And as we started to enter the room, they both waved and were like, bye, and went out the back door. And so that's when Karlin started yelling.
This is Karlyn Borysenko. She is the Libertarian Party New Hampshire candidate for governor. And she said she was, I think, the closest to them or something like that. So she felt like she had to get something out. So
yeah,
she what did she yell, like a question at him or something?
Yeah, she just yelled, "Tulsi, why are you supporting a warmonger?" And
short and sweet.
Then all these Baltic supporters swarmed her.
Oh yeah.
And so the rest of us didn't start yelling, but we just figured, we'll just get in on the conversation. So I actually had this guy get right in my face, and it was funny. I've got video of this. I was standing in the same spot the whole time, and he kept getting right up close to me, and then he even said, "You might want to step back, buddy, like you're getting in my face." And I was like, dude,
you didn't move
I
anywhere.
didn't move at all. And
that's so common, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
People do that all the time.
And he was a Tulsi supporter from 2020.
You remembered him?
I don't know him, but he was saying anyone that Tulsi endorses has my support. And I was like,
wow,
okay, well,
mindless.
what about Joe Biden? And he was like, well, yeah. And I was like, well, she endorsed Hillary Clinton after Bernie dropped out. And he was like, and just kind of walked off.
Why don't you just tell us, dude, that you don't think for yourself?
Yeah.
Right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the Baltic supporters were freaking out, calling Karlyn Borysenko like an imposter or something like that. Or plant.
I think she was wearing a Tulsi shirt. So she was a plant. Sort of not a plant, but in disguise, a few of us were. So David Fite, who's a libertarian who also worked on her campaign, he came and he brought a bunch of shirts to help us disguise ourselves. I was telling everyone, don't wear like pot leaf shirts or Gadsden flags. We're supposed to look like Republicans or Tulsi supporters.
There's more coming up here. And then you tried to go to another one of this guy's events. We'll talk about that coming up here in moments. You can share your thoughts as well. The number is 603-283-6160. And then we'll get into Putin and what he's doing with martial law coming up.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denselow. Liz Truss's resignation from her role as UK Prime Minister has sparked speculation over who will take her place. It's understood that former PM Boris Johnson is among those considering a leadership run. Ollie Barrett has more from London on Truss's position and when a new Prime Minister will be in Downing Street.
We are being told by the Conservative Party's 1922 committee, which organises the leadership process, that it will all be done and dusted in a week. So Liz Truss only has a few more days in Downing Street, but for that period she remains Prime Minister. She told us in that speech outside Downing Street earlier that she had already rung King Charles to tell him that she was resigning as Conservative Party leader, but she remains as Prime Minister until the next Conservative Party leader is in place, and that person then becomes the next Prime Minister.
European Union leaders are gathering in Brussels for 2 days of talks on tackling the bloc's deepening energy crisis. The EU used to rely on Moscow for around 40% of its natural gas imports. But after months of seeking out new suppliers, slashing consumption and boosting renewables, they're much less dependent on Russia. But gas prices remain sky high, and citizens and businesses are asking their governments for answers. Our reporter Rosie Burchard is at the talks in Brussels.
At least 15 countries, including Italy, Greece and Poland, they want big market interventions like capping gas prices. Meanwhile, Germany, the Netherlands and some others warn that could simply cause suppliers to sell their gas elsewhere at a higher price. Now, they all agree something has to be done because the fallout of the war in Ukraine is really increasingly being felt here, and governments know they need to keep the public on side as they pledge to keep up support to Kyiv for as long as it takes.
An American woman's admitted responsibility for the death of a British teenager in a case that's caused a diplomatic row between the US and UK governments. 19-year-old Harry Dunn was killed in a crash outside a US military base in England in 2019. Our US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
Anne Secoulis had turned out of RAF Croughton in Northamptonshire and driven on the wrong side of the road for over 20 seconds before she hit Harry Dunn, who was riding his motorbike on the correct side of the road. She had diplomatic immunity asserted on her behalf by the US administration and left the UK 19 days later. An extradition request for her to be brought to the UK was rejected by the US government, causing tension between the two countries. The guilty plea from Ms. Secoulis brings a legal resolution to the Dunn family.
An alliance of leading NGOs in Africa says 58 million people are in urgent need of food aid in Central and Western Africa. More than half of the people facing a hunger crisis are living in Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. From bureaus worldwide, this is it.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. The phones are open and you can join us here talking about hypocritical politicians, or do I repeat myself? With you tonight, it's Ian
and Reed Coverdale.
And if you've ever worked or lived at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988, you've suffered from cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, you are maybe entitled to compensation. There were contaminants in the drinking water during those years that may have led to those diseases, and you may be facing some deadlines on filing, so don't wait on this. Give a call to this number I'm going to give you and find out if you or a loved one are eligible. Apparently some family members are also eligible for this. 888-918-1037 is the number, 888-918-1037. If you were at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and you've had a serious health issue, money is already set aside. Again, that number is 888-918-1037. So we've been regaling you with Reed's encounters, or at least attempted encounters, they scurried away as quickly as they possibly could when the Libertarians basically entered the hallway as Tulsi Gabbard, the supposedly anti-war former Democratic presidential candidate and a total pro-war war hawk psychopath, General Don Bolduc, were in a hallway after they had a speaking event where they refused to accept questions from the audience after being promised that would happen. Then they scurried away as the Libertarians came in. You ended up just having some interesting conversations with people there, and there was a brief video clip of one of the Libertarians yelling at Tulsi as she was running out the door, which of course set off the Bolduc supporters. Pretty entertaining. But you said you didn't have enough of these people. You went again to attend one of these Bolduc events. Now, was Tulsi supposed to be at the other one that you went to up in the North Country, or was it just...
I went to two more, actually.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
So I went to one in Laconia with a friend. And
was this on a different day?
Yeah, this was the following day. And I mean, it was a meet and greet at a restaurant, and there were like 300 people there.
Wow.
It was this tiny little restaurant, so I couldn't even get inside.
Right.
And so they give their speech or whatever, and then they're doing pictures. And so my friend worked on her campaign with me back in 2020. So we were just standing outside like 20 feet away from the picture line, and they're just taking pictures, and then my friend yells, "Hey, Tulsi," and waves, and she sees us, and then she waves back, and then once they're done taking a picture, she runs over and gives us both a hug, and then runs back to keep taking pictures, and the campaign manager from the day before, who had been really skeptical of me and like eyeballing me and everything, he was kind of visibly shocked by that whole...
that she would pay attention to
that
you?
She knew who I was and even ran over and like gave me a hug or whatever.
But
so
it wasn't enough time to ask her a question?
It wasn't. I mean, and I also really wanted to ask Bolduc the question, because he's the guy I'm trying to expose here the most, because he's the one that people are going to be voting for. I was planning to go to an event in Conway that night, which was advertised as a town hall, which... At a town hall, you're supposed to be allowed to ask questions.
That's the whole point.
That's
to ask questions, yeah.
So
it's like an old New Hampshire thing that's been going on forever here.
Yeah. So at that event, I forget, it was the political director and some other guy saw me before that whole exchange with Tulsi, and they were skeptical of me again because they'd seen me the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just walking around outside, and they came up and were like, "What? Can we help you?" I was like, "No, I'm just here." And I told them, like, I worked on Tulsi's campaign 2 years ago, so I'm just here to, check out what's going on. And they were very skeptical. So when that whole thing happened where she ran over and gave me a hug or whatever, they were also obviously visibly shocked.
Mm-hmm.
But then that night there was an event going on in Conway, so I think this was the last event she was doing with him. And I really wanted to put this. I mean, I can ask this question to him at any time, but it's perfect with her there, because it's a good juxtaposition. And I'm standing outside in line waiting to go in, and so then the two guys who had seen me in Laconia, they come up to me in line and say, "Hey, can we go talk to you over there?" And I said, "Okay." So they pulled me out of line. They didn't pull me out of line.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't touching me, but they, said, "Hey, come with us."
They didn't want anyone else to hear what they were going to say to you.
Yeah. So they said, "What are you doing here?" And I just said, "I'm here to ask a question."
You're a person who lives in New Hampshire. You were born and raised in New Hampshire. You have a podcast, so you're a media personality as well. Why shouldn't you be at a political event?
Right.
In New Hampshire.
So they said, are you going to cause a scene? And I said, well, I've already had 2 opportunities, and I haven't caused a scene.
Mm-hmm.
I could have if I wanted to. And I said, you also saw her run over and give me a hug, so she knows who I am. Like, I'm not some guy who's going to come cause problems or, assault somebody or something. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I just want to ask a question. I'm a podcaster, and I, know a lot about politics, and I know Sharon Baldock too, his wife. I have her phone number right here if you need to see it.
Wow.
And I was like, I sat next to her at an event a few weeks ago, and she said she could try to get him on my podcast. And then that fell through because there wasn't enough time, apparently, or that's what they said. And so I'm here to ask him directly myself the question that I would ask him on my podcast. And they said, well, we can tell you you're not going to be able to ask a question.
Wow.
And I said, you mean there's not going to be time? And they're like, well,
we're just not going to call on you.
There's probably not going to be time for you to ask a question.
For you specifically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so they said, this is a public...
Well, it's nice of them to actually inform you that you shouldn't waste your time being at the event.
Exactly.
Because it really sucks to wait, however long this thing is, an hour long.
Yeah.
You're listening to these politicians, you don't ever even have a chance.
Yeah, and...
I guess if there's one thing I can give to them, it's that they did you that favor.
Oh, yeah. Well, they said, we can disinvite you from this if we want to. And I said, yeah, you can, but why would you? Like, there's no reason to. I haven't done anything to warrant disinvitation. And then they said, well, what if we get the general on your podcast instead?
Okay.
And I said, well, I've
great.
just told you I've been through this. I have his wife's phone number, and I've been in contact with the media team, and they called me and said they're not going to have time. And he said, all right, well, I'm the political director. I can get him on your podcast.
Oh,
and so we exchanged phone numbers and everything, and I shook his hand right there, and I said, all right, if you can get him on my podcast, I'll just leave. I won't even go in there at all.
Sounded like a promise to me, Reed. I didn't hear the actual conversation, but it sounded like he was making a promise to you.
Yeah, and he has kept up with me. This was on
2 days ago?
Monday.
Monday, okay.
Yeah, and he has kept up with me the last couple days. But
so he's in contact with you.
He is in contact with me.
Texted him?
Yep.
Okay.
And I told him what I was going to ask him. I said, he has, the general has said some inflammatory foreign policy remarks. And you guys are behind Hassan in the polls. You can't win this election without libertarian support. If you want any libertarians to vote for you, you have to answer this important question.
And coming on your podcast would be a good way to do that. And, if this does pan out, and I have no reason to believe that it will, but if it does pan out and he appears on Naturalist Capitalist with you, then that's even better than you bird dogging him at an event. He'll be even more on the spot, and there'll be more people who care who are watching that particular answer to that question. And it'll be on the record because you'll get a good recording of it. So I hope that works out. But
me too.
Don't get your hopes up too much on that. It doesn't sound like you are.
So if you go to a Baldock event, ask him when he's coming on Naturalist Capitalist, because he might actually do a Q&A if I'm not there. And might call on you.
All right, so that takes us up to speed on the Bulldog situation, right? Anything
Yeah,
else?
for the most, I just if you want to go to my channel, I did just do a whole episode about this whole thing, like down to why I supported Tulsi 2 years ago, what I think of her endorsing this guy, and then all the events that took place over the last few days. So go check it out.
Check him out at Naturalist Capitalist. He's on Odyssey. You can find Odyssey over at our channel, which is video.freetalklive.com. I don't like to ever just tell people Odyssey because it's always spelled differently, but if you just go to video.freetalklive.com, I'll take you right there, and then just search for Naturalist Capitalist. As we continue here, we're going to get into, we talked a little bit about Putin earlier briefly during the discussion of a psychopathic general. Putin is now calling for martial law in some parts of what he says is Russia and what the Ukrainian government says is Ukraine. So things are perhaps going to be ramping up a little bit there, as was predicted. We'll get into that. Of course, your calls and thoughts are welcome. You can bring up anything you want to discuss here on Free Talk Live. The number is 603-283-6160. This is Free Talk Live, and you can take control of the airwaves.
First things first, you should offer, not ask, to renegotiate. I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. For instant savings, make a list. Video and music streaming services, insurance premiums, your cable bill, your cell phone plan, that gym membership you stopped using by February, all those recurring costs that hit your credit card like clockwork every month. And about that card, tell them you want a lower rate. Many who do get one. And if you don't, because credit cards are stealing each other's customers, sign up for a new one with an introductory 0% balance transfer offer so you at least stop the clock on what you already owe. How are you coping? Post your inflation hacks at andyoucanquoteme.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 15th through the 18th for the 7th annual Fork Fest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Fork Fest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which sold out in 2022. For 2023, we're going back to where it all started, the weekend before PorcFest. ForkFest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 15th through the 18th. You can find out more at the unofficial website forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the ForkFest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the ForkFest forum. You can find links to those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there June 15th through the 18th. forkfest.party. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
Is oral health important to you? If you don't like your own teeth, fresh breath, or kissing people, then by all means stop listening. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I became passionate about the product that she created and never want to live without it. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, but I find it does much more. They want you to love My Magic Mud as much as I do, so they're giving you a money-back guarantee plus 20% off. Go to mymagicmud.com and use coupon code FTL20 at checkout. mymagicmud.com, FTL20.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. The phones are open, and you're invited, of course, to utilize them to bring up anything that you want to talk about. With you in the studio, you've got Ian
and Reed Coverdale.
And the early bird discount for the tickets to Prague at the Liberty in Our Lifetime conference put on by the Free Cities Foundation, that expired earlier this month. The event itself is about to happen, but if you are a total procrastinator and somehow are in the city of Prague right now and you still want to attend this conference, you can still get tickets. I think they're closing the sales tomorrow. So you can go to lifetimeliberty.com and use code FTL20, and you'll be able to attend and see our friend and co-host Mark Edge speak at this conference, which is going to be themed about parallel structures for progress. They're going to explore physical developments and parallel structures emerging in education and finance that offer alternatives for people looking for better ways to learn, educate their children, and invest in the future. You can go to lifetimeliberty.com and use code FTL20 to save 20% on the tickets for the event that starts tomorrow. Once again, that's lifetimeliberty.com, and follow them on Twitter at handle LibertyIOL, like Liberty in Our Lifetime, LibertyIOL, and I'm sure they will be announcing their third year, presuming this year goes as well as their first year did. And so if you're in Prague right now waiting for the conference to start, hope you guys have a good time. Wish I could travel, but I'm not allowed to under my bail conditions. So Reed, we were talking about Putin a little bit earlier with a psychopathic general who wants to get into a full-on hot war with Russia and China. And the latest news, as reported by various different sources, but I always like to go to RT. In this case, I also have the AP story pulled up as well to get the Western propaganda side of things. But what is the RT perspective on Putin, who is now announcing martial law in the 4 new Russian federal subjects, as they're describing them here in the RT story? RT, of course, is the Russia Today site, RT.com, officially run by the Russian government. Russia has introduced emergency measures due to the continued threat posed by Ukraine and the need for a more efficient response to it, according to Putin this Wednesday. Speaking at a meeting of the National Security Council, Putin said he had signed several documents detailing the policy changes, reiterating accusations against Kyiv, stating that it uses quote-unquote terrorist methods, unquote, against Russia. Ukrainian forces, he said, quote, sabotage crucial infrastructure and stage assassinations of local officials. Just like their ideological forefathers, Hitler's collaborators, they try to create a criminal underworld, send sabotage teams on our soil, he explained. He claimed Russian law enforcement officials have prevented several planned attacks on, quote, mass gatherings, transport and energy facilities, unquote, including a nuclear power plant. Now, whether any of that's true, I have absolutely no idea. But the story has been that while the eastern side of Ukraine sort of tried to declare, at least part of it tried to declare independence in 2014 from Ukraine, there have been ongoing attacks brought by the government in Kyiv against the people in these areas. And I don't think that is made up.
No.
That seems to be pretty plausible, those claims. Have you been following any of that over the last several years?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so what happened was Crimea. So a lot of people don't know this, but when Crimea was taken by Russia, no one was killed. A lot of people just don't realize that. Not a single person died. All the Ukrainian forces just left. They left. And since then, it's been under Russian control. Mm-hmm. And then after that, Luhansk and Donetsk held referendums to join Russia.
This was in 2014?
This is I think this was still 2014. Mm-hmm. It was toward the end of 2014.
I didn't realize they were to join Russia. I thought they were independence referendums.
No, so they were to join Russia, and then Putin denied their entrance to Russia. And so
And at that point, they said, all right, well, we'll be independent republics.
Yeah, so this is when the war between Kiev and the Donbass started. Roughly 15,000 people were killed over several months.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally, I forget who was president of Ukraine at the time, but Obama, Angela Merkel, president of Ukraine, and Putin, I think that's all the leaders, they all met together and they came up with the Minsk II agreement, which established Luhansk and Donetsk as still part of Ukraine, but with a heavy amount of autonomy. So basically, they'd have their really strong 10th Amendment that would allow them to govern themselves, but they would still be officially recognized as part of Ukraine. And after the Minsk II agreement, there was a relative ceasefire until a couple months before the invasion that just took place. When Kiev started shelling the Donbass region again, killing a bunch of people, and then the invasion happened. So you can take from that what you want.
Martial law has now been announced, according to Putin, in the 4 new federal subjects, the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics and the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions. Their citizens voted in last month's referendums to break away from Kyiv and join Russia. Ukraine, of course, has rejected the validity of those votes. They rejected them before they even happened, rather than try to see if the votes were, oversee them in some way, bring a third party in, like the UN or somebody to, try to have a certification of the votes. No, the Western world just said, no, that's a sham. We're just not going to.
Well, I don't know if these guys missed the memo or something, but the media has been telling me for the last year that election denial is fascism.
Yeah. Well, and democracy is good, except when the people that support Russia do it.
Exactly.
The 4 provinces had already had martial law in place when Russia accepted their bid, said Putin. The decree, which he expects Parliament to ratify swiftly, will give legal basis under Russian law for what is de facto happening on the ground, he said. In a separate decree, Putin ordered a medium action level in several other parts of western Russia. Those include the Crimean Republic, the city of Sevastopol, as well as several other areas. The special regime gives regional officials additional authority to ensure security and rapidly react to any emergencies. The other Russian regions were put at elevated and basic levels, depending on their proximity to Ukraine. The administrations of the 4 regions under martial law will have a maximum level of additional authority. The governors of different parts of Russia face different challenges and need different powers, he said, to deal with them. So by no means, is Russia a great free place or a government that should be cheered on or anything like that. I mean, martial law is martial law, and this life has really got to suck for the people in eastern Ukraine right now. They are in this disputed territory where you've got Russia saying this is ours and Ukraine is going to say this is ours, and this is where the fight is going to, it seems like it's going to be focused. And that, apparently what they are doing is they're trying to evacuate people. So to their credit, they are telling people to get out, from what I understand, from these areas. They're getting citizenry, if you will, out, expecting that conflicts will be erupting. I'm not sure where they're sending them to. Maybe it's Western Russia or something like that. Further here, according to RT.com, he has instructed the Russian federal government to form a special coordination center for various aspects of the Ukraine crisis, from repairing weapons systems for the military to providing medical treatment to injured people and repairing damage sustained by towns and cities, and so on. So they're supporting the reservists by, I guess, giving them a monthly wage, blah, blah, blah. So the rest of it's pretty political, but the martial law thing is very real, and those are experiences people are going to have to deal with there.
Yeah.
I don't, I'm grateful that we don't have to deal with that here. Thank goodness. We don't see, luckily, nuclear war to be on the immediate horizon, as long as the U.S. can keep it in their pants, so to speak here. But, this can change at a moment's notice, and hopefully it won't. Hopefully the U.S. will keep out, but we know that they're sending all kinds of billions of dollars over there, billions of taxpayer dollars, printed money, to support Ukraine. They don't want to see an end to this conflict. They want this to continue because it's just more money for the military-industrial complex. They're shuffling over weapons. They're shuffling over everything but troops, basically, over into Ukraine to make this more possible.
Yeah. No, I mean, when we look at this, we have to look at it from the perspective, what can we stop doing to stop the escalation of this situation? Because the reality is we can't do anything about, what's happening inside of Russia. I mean, we just physically can't.
Not unless you want to start
World War III.
Potentially nuclear war.
So, what mistakes have we made up to this point? What can we do going forward to try to, calm this situation down? And if you're listening to the media, you're believing that, killing a bunch more people is the most merciful thing to do for some reason. Think of all the innocent Ukrainian civilians who have died over the last several months because of, two giant governments wanting to prove a point. That's what this has come down to.
Territory conflict.
Yeah. And so, what can we do to try to stop the escalation of tensions from happening? That's really what
we can't do anything. We're just sitting here and we can talk about it, maybe hopefully change some people's minds, but ultimately it's up to these power-seeking people who have all of the incentives in the world to continue and escalate these matters, to escalate them as much as they can without getting to nuclear, right? Because then they know they could die, and that's ultimately the only thing that really stops nuclear conflict from happening is mutually assured destruction. Hour 3's coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com. There are basically two types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. Liz Truss's resignation from her role as UK Prime Minister has sparked speculation over who will take her place. It's understood that former PM Boris Johnson is among those considering a leadership run. Ollie Barrett has more from London on Truss's position and when a new Prime Minister will be in Downing Street.
We are being told by the Conservative Party's 1922 committee, which organises the leadership process, that it will all be done and dusted in a week. So Liz Truss only has a few more days in Downing Street, but for that period she remains Prime Minister. She told us in that speech outside Downing Street earlier that she had already rung King Charles to tell him that she was resigning as Conservative Party leader, but she remains as Prime Minister until the next Conservative Party leader is in place, and that person then becomes the next Prime Minister.
European Union leaders are gathering in Brussels for 2 days of talks on tackling the bloc's deepening energy crisis. The EU used to rely on Moscow for around 40% of its natural gas imports. But after months of seeking out new suppliers, slashing consumption and boosting renewables, they're much less dependent on Russia. But gas prices remain sky high, and citizens and businesses are asking their governments for answers. Our reporter Rosie Burchard is at the talks in Brussels.
At least 15 countries, including Italy, Greece and Poland, well, they want big market interventions like capping gas prices. Meanwhile, Germany, the Netherlands and some others warn that that could simply cause suppliers to sell their gas elsewhere at a higher price. Now, they all agree something has to be done because the fallout of the war in Ukraine is really increasingly being felt here, and governments know they need to keep the public on side as they pledge to keep up support to Kyiv for as long as it takes.
An American woman's admitted responsibility for the death of a British teenager in a case that's caused a diplomatic row between the US and UK governments. 19-year-old Harry Dunn was killed in a crash outside a US military base in England in 2019. Our US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
Anne Sakoulis had turned out of RAF Croughton in Northamptonshire and driven on the wrong side of the road for over 20 seconds before she hit Harry Dunn, who was riding his motorbike on the correct side of the road. She had diplomatic immunity asserted on her behalf by the US administration and left the UK 19 days later. An extradition request for her to be brought to the UK was rejected by the US government, causing tension between the two countries. The guilty plea from Ms Sakoulis brings a legal resolution to the Dunn family.
An alliance of leading NGOs in Africa says 58 million people are in urgent need of food aid in Central and Western Africa. More than half of the people facing a hunger crisis are living in Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, updating you today on a story we covered earlier in the week. It is now official. India's opposition Congress party has a new leader. And for the first time in 24 years, he is not a member of the Gandhi family. Mallikarjun Kharge, 80 years old, now assumes the mantle at the helm of the Indian Congress party ahead of a tough election battle in 2025. FSN's Ishan Garg in our Delhi bureau has more.
Mallikarjun Kharge has been with the Congress party for nearly 3 decades now. He's considered an experienced leader and one who's close to the Gandhi family. He's promised reforms in the party, but analysts say his proximity to Sonia and Rahul Gandhi could mean that not much will change. And that could come as a disappointment for many party workers who blame the Gandhis for Congress's defeats in 2 consecutive federal elections. But eventually, it could result in the rise of a united opposition front, one that voters say has been practically absent from India's political system since Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to power in 2014.
And of course, the biggest challenge facing all India's opposition parties is Narendra Modi's popularity. For Congress, the clock is now ticking to prove that it has the capacity to challenge the Prime Minister in the minds of the public between now and the next Indian election. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denzelo reporting.
Hi, I'm Clint Webb, and I'm running for Senate. I have a short cropped haircut, a pretty enough yet accessible looking wife, and a newborn baby that I've dressed in a suit to prove to you that I mean business. For the last 15 years, I've lived my life in such a bland, uncontroversial, and repressed manner that it's almost unnatural. Why? Because I've been preparing to be your representative since I was a child. Most well-adjusted, sane men would be hesitant to take a job where their decisions would so drastically affect the lives of so many. But not me. I possess a sort of sociopathic narcissism that makes me think that I should be in charge of everyone. But all of that needs to start here at home, in this beautiful state that I've grown to love since I moved here 18 months ago. Together, we can piggyback some of our state's legitimate needs onto my unquenchable lust for self-glorification. And that's a promise.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. We're kicking off the 3rd hour of the program. Here in the studio, it's Ian
and Reed Coverdale.
And the phones are open for you. If you want to join the show, you can. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Coming up, since we're talking about the military, I've got a story that ties in here where we haven't talked about a military spending story in quite a while. And they're always out there. So I got
Those don't happen that often, do they? Military spending stories.
I think they happen more often probably than they get reported on.
True.
The insane levels of what they are willing to pay for things when, if you're not spending your money, then who really cares what they cost? But first, we go to your phone calls and thoughts. Jamie is on the line to start things out here in, I think, the Huntsville area. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yes, sir.
What's on your mind?
Yeah, y'all mentioned something about eating bugs.
Eating bugs. Yeah, well, we didn't cover it tonight, but that is definitely something that has been covered. There's a huge push by people like the World Economic Forum and other big-moneyed, big corporate, big government interests that seem to want to encourage people to eat insects.
Oh, that's disgusting.
I suspect that it is. I have not actually tried this. Reed, have you heard anything about this bug-eating push that's going on out there?
Do, like, lobsters count as bugs?
I don't think so.
Then no. I mean, I've heard about it, but I've never tried it.
Yeah, we're talking about, like, worms and crickets and things like that.
One thing I ever had was frog legs.
Yep, no, that doesn't count either. Frogs eat bugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the same thing. So when did you hear about this? Was it on our show, Jamie, that you heard the discussion?
Yep.
Okay. So do you know anybody that you think would be interested in eating bugs?
No, I would not be. No.
No, I didn't think you would, but apparently what they're trying to do is introduce it into the schools. So they want to get to your children when they're at a young age and tell them that, oh yeah, this is cool. Oh, isn't it? Oh, it's gross, but it's also really cool because kids think bugs are fun and gross or whatever. Like you're probably more interested in bugs as a kid than you are as an adult, and so they're moving into classrooms. They're bringing in these bug eating experts who bring in free bugs for the kids, and they pass them all around. And there's video of this going on. It's not just happening in the United States. It's happening. I saw a video at like a Swedish school where they're pitching bugs to kids.
Oh, that's God.
Do you have any kids, Jamie?
No, sir.
Okay.
I'm single and no kids.
I gotcha. Well, then you don't have to worry about this right now. But people that have kids,
No.
this is another reason. And thank you for the call, Jamie. I appreciate it. It's yet another reason to get your kids out of these government schools. You have no idea what is being taught behind those government school doors. And it's not good.
Get out of government schools. You don't have to eat bugs.
Well, I mean, think about, did you go to a government school, Reed?
Yeah.
I did too.
Off and on. I was homeschooled a lot, but
lucky
did
you.
both.
So, the standard answer when kids at government schools are asked, what happened in school today, honey? Nothing, right? You don't get to find out the details of the things that they're pushing. Maybe your kids would tell you because bug eating is so unusual. Maybe you would find out about that one happening. But you certainly don't hear about the regular propaganda that they're feeding the kids at these schools, and now they're literally feeding them with bugs. So it's very, very disturbing. And look, I'm not against the idea of eating a bug. Like I said before, if it hadn't been pushed so hard by the World Economic Forum, if I was at some dinner party and they've got hors d'oeuvres or whatever that the waiters are passing around, and I was in the mood and other people were trying, a fried cricket or something like that, I might be willing to do it. So I'm not going to say that I'm closed-minded to the concept, but just the fact that the World Economic Forum, which has this whole big plan of they're not the Build Back Better. What's their phrase? They've got one too that they've been pushing. It's just
you'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
That's one of their lines. Yeah, they have this vision basically that they want to push on people, and it's this idea of you'll own nothing, you'll be happy. You will, you won't live anywhere that you own. You'll just sleep in some sort of room. What's that, Bonnie? Thank you. The Great Reset.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for. It came out big time during COVID. And so bug eating is part of this Great Reset idea. They want to take the established industries in the world, they want to upset them. They want to put their buddies in various different industries in charge. They want the government agents, the politicians that are in their pocket to set all this up to make it possible to have people living in a world where they own nothing and they're supposedly happy because, well, they get their virtual reality set from Meta, aka Facebook, on, and they're living their life in a virtual quote-unquote metaverse. I mean, it's just this crazy, like, dystopian idea. And so far, the metaverse thing hasn't really impressed anyone. I don't know if you've seen any of the screenshots from it, Reed, but it's embarrassingly, ridiculously poor quality looking. I don't see why anyone would want to spend any time there right now, but it's early yet. You know, they're going to develop this. They're going to pour billions of dollars into it. So they want you to literally be eating slop, eating bugs, sitting at home, working online and working in this and spending time online and staying away from people. And of course, the whole COVID was experiment number one in this area to see just how much people can stand being away from other humans, which a lot of people are going to go crazy, right? Because humans are a social creature. We really have to have human interaction. So they wanted to see, well, how long can we keep people away from one another for? What's going to happen? How many people are going to crack? How many people are going to go insane, kill themselves, start drowning in drugs and alcohol? And of course, we saw all of those things happen. And we're still seeing the effects of it. For instance, the kids that had to stay home, they weren't able to get together with their friends and hang out. I'm not talking about going to government school. I don't think that was one of the major failings of the conservatives during the whole COVID thing. Was like, oh, well, we need to be back in government schools. Like, no, this is your chance. This is your chance. Like, if there was a bright light of COVID, it was the excuse to get out of the government schools.
Sure.
To actually be home with your kids, to have some idea of what they're actually doing in school during the day. And it turned out that when some parents were paying attention, they didn't like what they saw. So if you want to jump in here, you can. Sarah's on the line. She's in New Mexico. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yes. I just want to bring up that the United States, I think, per year, we kill about one road worker.
Why are you killing road workers?
Well, I don't even have a car.
So you're going out there and you're just shooting them, or what are you doing to them?
Well, it's the drivers with the cars that speed.
So when you say we kill road workers, you aren't even a driver. Like, even if you were going to say collectively we, the drivers of America, not even that we would include you, Sarah. So what you're saying is drivers are killing road workers, not you, right? You never did that.
Right, that's
you
the
don't drive.
average. So what is that? So one person averaged out every other week. Is that or about 110? What
Hold on,
that?
there's
Like
26 weeks.
150?
Hold on, the 26 weeks is half a year. What was the original statistic? I've already forgotten it.
Yeah, one every 2 weeks.
Okay, so that's 26 road workers per year, according to you, Sarah. And where did you hear this story? Was it on
That doesn't sound like a lot, to be honest. Only 26 per year.
Well, I mean, if you're look at you guys have this attitude. Well, as long as the road worker is somebody else, that's fine with me. As long as I'm not a road worker, who cares if they?
No one here said that, Sarah.
Like a red cone. I mean,
I don't know where you got that idea, but no one here said that. However, I will say this: that jobs are risky, especially outdoor working construction kind of jobs. If it's not being hit by a car, which is one of probably the most risky things of being a road worker, it's getting crushed by construction equipment or whatever. Like, there's all kinds of things that can happen when you're on the job. In fact, I believe roofers, if I recall correctly, are one of the most dangerous professions, like way more dangerous than the police, for instance.
Yeah. Logging is
number 2, I think, or something. They're up there. Both of them are really, really dangerous professions. That doesn't mean that we're celebrating these people who are getting injured or potentially dying on the job. It's a horrible thing to have happen, and I feel for anybody who's, in the families of these folks, the friends, the co-workers that have to experience this. This is horrible, but the construction must go on. And construction workers, they don't get paid the least. They tend to get paid pretty well for what they do. So risks are involved, and you get paid for the risk. Thanks for the call, Sarah. There's more coming up here in moments. We'll get into military spending on the way.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Inflation, a sidelined labor force, and ever-increasing interest rates. It's the perfect storm for pushing the U.S. economy over the edge. Savvy investors are diversifying into gold and silver with BullionMax.com. You can buy direct from BullionMax.com without talking to a salesperson, and your precious metals will ship fully insured directly to your home. Free Talk Live listeners can now order one of BullionMax's most popular products, the Goldback. Now in stock, but supplies are going fast. To get your Goldbacks, go to BullionMax.com/FTL.
Have you had enough of the big-name web hosting services that are long on promises but short on bleeding-edge features, uptime, and customer service? Try Agorist Hosting, the agile web host that offers full concierge service from website redesign, full e-commerce solutions, custom apps for your Shopify store, IPFS integration, and more. Agorist Hosting is ready to take your web presence into the future. To get started, head over to agoristhosting.com.
Do you prefer to listen to Free Talk Live on your schedule on demand? You can find the link to our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com, which features the daily digest of our radio show 7 days a week. Just drop our RSS feed into your favorite podcast client or subscribe to us on the large platforms if you prefer, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartMedia, Spotify, and Stitcher. All the links are at feeds.freetalklive.com. If the daily digests aren't enough for you and you really don't want to miss a moment of Free Talk Live, you can always sign up for our AMPS Patreon at amps.freetalklive.com for just $5 a month, and you'll get the full radio show without recorded commercials. Plus, you'll help us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live. That's amps.freetalklive.com to join AMPS, or feeds.freetalklive.com to get our main podcast, or find us on the major podcast platforms. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, and the phones are open here. You can join us. Bring up whatever you want. Number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And I want to say thank you to the people who have stepped up so far and donated to the fundraiser for the Ballad of the Crypto 6 documentary. For those that don't know, our studio was raided back in March of 2021. Multiple homes of hosts of the show and also friends of ours were raided and 6 people were arrested. It's the Crypto 6, charged with various different victimless so-called crimes involving cryptocurrency and not asking government permission. I'm going to trial on this, which may be as soon as December. There is an independent film crew based out of Mexico that is interested in making a documentary about this. They've already come up here to shoot some footage that was about a year ago, and they turned that into about a 9-minute-long trailer, which you can watch over at Ballad of the Crypto 6 with the numeral 6.com. They've already had a couple of major supporters jump into this thing, so I'm really happy to see that happen. I didn't know what was going to happen as far as support for this is concerned, and I think they're already past 50%. Now, I don't think that shows on the Indiegogo, and I'll see if I can pull that up to see where it's at, because somebody came in with a big crypto donation, and that doesn't count towards the Indiegogo goal. So even though the Indiegogo shows like 23%, it's really at like 50+% apparently, thanks to apparently a Bitcoin whale came in and really helped them out with this. So if you want to help out with this, you can join the backers and get some bennies like the T-shirts and possibly even hosting Free Talk Live, dining with some of your favorite Free Talk Live hosts. It's over at Ballad of the Crypto 6 with the numeral 6.com. So we're going to get into another place you went to, Reed. You've been going quite a bit hither and thither. We'll get into that in a bit. But since we've been talking about military things, there's a story over at Reason.com that they had a little while back that I marked for show prep. And since we've been talking about military people like psychopathic General Don Bolduc tonight, there's a story here from Reason about the Army spending on things like printers. I mean, we've all seen the stories over the years. I think it was, what was it? They spent thousands of dollars on hammers or something ridiculous way back in the 90s or whatever. There's always toilets, whatever they're spending tons of money on. Well, here's the latest example. The Army has failed to properly account for tens of millions of dollars worth of equipment. According to the Department of Defense's internal watchdog, a report released this summer by the DoD Office of the Inspector General detailed the results of a recent audit of military bases in Kuwait. Specifically, the audit intended, quote, to determine whether the Army effectively accounted for government-furnished property, or GFP. And guess what? They didn't. The audit focused on 2 bases, Camp Arifjan and Camp Buering. In 2010, a contractor who's not named in the report was awarded a $75 million contract to provide operations and security to support both bases, including, quote, food and housing, payroll support, fire protection, security protection, law enforcement, and transportation. The contract was extended multiple times, totaling more than $5 billion over a decade. According to the contractor's records, in that time it received more than $108 million in GFP, government-furnished property, from the Army, such as printers, refrigeration units, and vehicles. But the audit found that according to the Army's records, it had given the contractor nearly $157 million worth of equipment. So counterintuitively, despite its dollar amount being about 50% higher, the Army recorded having provided 23,000 fewer individual items. The report determined the Army had failed to account for at least 23,374 items. Of the remaining 123,988 items the contractor said they had received, the Army failed to record identifiers like contractor serial numbers on 111,877 of them. So like 90% of the items that the contractor said they received from the Army, they did not have any kind of proper records on them. So if there's no record on these things, then they can go anywhere and they can be given to anybody, right, without any kind of oversight or any ability to hold anyone accountable. Mm-hmm. For the items that could be checked, so roughly 11 or 12,000 of them, the audit found costs that differed wildly between the Army and the contractor's records. For example, the contractor received 12 printers, each estimated to cost up to $400. The Army's records listed the printers at $1.1 million each.
That's kind of close.
For a total discrepancy of over $13.5 million. The contractor also received 17 refrigeration units, which it logged at a little over $24,000 each, while the Army recorded a cost of over $650,000 each. The auditors discovered the error came from the Army's procurement officer accidentally entering the total cost of 17 units as the per-unit cost. Oops. And even though he discovered and corrected the error, it never updated in the Army's system. And this is just bureaucracy. The bureaucrat ultimately made the mistake, and he made it clear that he'd made a mistake, but the bureaucracy and their systems are just so broken and so bad that the mistake couldn't be corrected or wasn't corrected for whatever reason. Maybe the software failed, maybe somebody up the line had to punch a button to approve it and they didn't, push the button or whatever. Who knows where the failure happened?
Yeah, the thing with all this type of stuff is there's no incentive to fix the problem. Right?
Sure.
Because there's no penalty. You have a guaranteed income. And in a lot of cases with the military, you have to spend a certain amount in order to get the funding again. So there's absolutely no incentive to cut any costs or make sure that you're being efficient with anything.
They want to go over budget so
Right.
they can get a bigger budget next year. I remember one of our co-hosts, or sometime co-host, Silver Dave, who was in the military, used to talk about how they would go out once a year and they would just have a whole day, or probably more than one day, where they would just shoot off ammunition. And the reason why was because if they didn't use it, they would lose it in the next budget.
Right.
So they literally just had to spend however many hours it was just blasting away and exploding this ammunition so they could get more. And that's just one of a myriad of similar stories. The report warned that lax record keeping on the part of the Army risks leading to theft or loss. In one cited example, quote, we found that one of the printers in our sample costing $408 was located at the contractor's staff apartment outside of Camp Arifjan without the Army's knowledge. Normally, removing the government property from the base requires the approval of the procurement officer, but due to the Army's lack of accountability and oversight of location, the relocation of the printer went unnoticed. Overall, for just 61 items audited, the report found a discrepancy of more than $65 million. These issues aren't new and not isolated to the two bases in Kuwait. In fact, after discovering the 12 printers listed for over $1 million each, the Inspector General determined that throughout the entire U.S. Army, there were 83 printers listed for that price, totaling a cost coverage of more than $93 million. Despite acknowledging GFP, the property, government property, in the hands of contractors as a potential weakness and audit property, they would not commit to a resolution before 2026. And if you've been in the military and you want to tell a story about some of the just incredible waste that you've seen, feel free to join us here at 603-283-6160. You can bring up whatever you want here. This is Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. Liz Truss's resignation from her role as UK Prime Minister has sparked speculation over who will take her place. It's understood that former PM Boris Johnson is among those considering a leadership run. Ollie Barrett has more from London on Truss's position and when a new Prime Minister will be in Downing Street.
We are being told by the Conservative Party's 1922 committee, which organises the leadership process, that it will all be done and dusted in a week. So Liz Truss only has a few more days in Downing Street, but for that period she remains Prime Minister. She told us in that speech outside Downing Street earlier that she had already rung King Charles to tell him that she was resigning as Conservative Party leader, but she remains as Prime Minister until the next Conservative Party leader is in place, and that person then becomes the next Prime Minister.
European Union leaders are gathering in Brussels for 2 days of talks on tackling the bloc's deepening energy crisis. The EU used to rely on Moscow for around 40% of its natural gas imports. But after months of seeking out new suppliers, slashing consumption and boosting renewables, they're much less dependent on Russia. But gas prices remain sky high, and citizens and businesses are asking their governments for answers. Our reporter Rosie Burchard is at the talks in Brussels.
At least 15 countries, including Italy, Greece and Poland, well, they want big market interventions like capping gas prices. Meanwhile, Germany, the Netherlands and some others warn that that could simply cause suppliers to sell their gas elsewhere at a higher price. Now, they all agree something has to be done because the fallout of the war in Ukraine is really increasingly being felt here, and governments know they need to keep the public on side as they pledge to keep up support to Kyiv for as long as it takes.
An American woman's admitted responsibility for the death of a British teenager in a case that's caused a diplomatic row between the US and UK governments. 19-year-old Harry Dunn was killed in a crash outside a US military base in England in 2019. Our US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
Anne Sakoulis had turned out of RAF Croughton in Northamptonshire and driven on the wrong side of the road for over 20 seconds before she hit Harry Dunn, who was riding his motorbike on the correct side of the road. She had diplomatic immunity asserted on her behalf by the US administration and left the UK 19 days later. An extradition request for her to be brought to the UK was rejected by the US government, causing tension between the two countries. The guilty plea from Ms Sakoulis brings a legal resolution to the Dunn family.
An alliance of leading NGOs in Africa says 58 million people are in urgent need of food aid in Central and Western Africa. More than half of the people facing a hunger crisis are living in Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. From bureaus worldwide, this is
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. Phones are open at 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can bring up anything you want. Here tonight, it's Ian.
And Reed Coverdale.
And you can join us online anytime you want over at freetalklive.com. If you want to subscribe to Free Talk Live, we do have our podcast feed, which has our daily digest, which is a summarized version of the show. We do a really lengthy radio show, but if you want to get that whittled down to about an hour's time, you can subscribe to our Daily Digest, which is our main podcast, available over at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com. I'm looking at this Reason story here that we were just sharing with you about the military and this huge discrepancy where one of the examples they're talking about what they call government issued or government furnished property, GFP, that's being given by the Department of Defense to a contractor in Kuwait. They looked at a couple of military bases there and how much money was spent, and this is according to their Inspector General, Office of the Inspector General, and they found huge discrepancies between what the numbers that the government said they were giving and what the numbers the contractor said they were receiving. So the article sort of focuses on these printers, which were allegedly $400 printers that were being counted as $1 million each for these printers. So it was the Army that was counting them as $1 million each in their little report or whatever. Okay, well, we issued them 15 printers at $1 million each, so $15 million in printers, when the reality was they were only $400 each. And what I'm trying to figure out here, and I'm not a scam artist, so I'm not immediately seeing the ways this can be taken advantage of, is like, who is benefiting from this? I mean, obviously the contractor benefits just in general because they're getting all this money, and you would think they're probably charging, if it's a $400 printer, it's probably really a $200 printer or whatever, and so the printer company's probably making bank on this. But the contractor themselves, they're saying they're not getting what they were expecting. They were told, the military said, oh, we gave you $157 million worth of equipment. The contractor says, no, it was $108 million worth of equipment. Here's the numbers, we ran them. And then they compared the numbers, and it was discovered that the Army had screwed up these numbers. So if the Army says, well, we're giving you $157 million worth of equipment, but there's only 100 and something million there, 108 million, who benefits? Is there something going on there? Is there somebody like in the Army who's, they're writing down $1 million on this, and that somehow increases a budget somewhere? Or that's where I'm like missing this. So if this is shouting out to you, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh yeah, that's obvious, like here's who's benefiting. Maybe you've been in the military and you know something about how this can benefit whoever it is that's writing up these reports or their buddies. Like, on its face, this is just a story about incompetence. Like, if we just walk away from it and that's the end of this, well, that's fine. Okay, the Army screwed up. They called printers $1 million printers, but it wasn't just the printers. It was all kinds of items on this, this inventory that was completely mispriced and way overpriced. So, is it just total incompetence that we're talking about here, or is there something else afoot? Is something being done here to cover up some sort of malfeasance or theft or shuffling product to somebody's buddy or whatever? That's what's just not clear to me. And I don't know if you're seeing anything here either.
All I can tell you, regardless of who's benefiting, we know who's losing out.
That's a good point. You mean the American people?
Yeah, everyone who pays taxes. So.
Okay, and actually we didn't get to the last paragraph here. It does say it's not clear if there's any actual fraud at play in Kuwait. Other than the missing printer, the report doesn't allege the contractor did anything wrong. Indeed, it seems like the military was the one mispricing these things. But auditors had no way to verify that information. During the life of the contract, the contractor reported over $13 million in lost equipment. Without proper record keeping, there's no way for the Army to determine whether that equipment was truly missing or whether it was, like the printer, creatively misplaced. And so I think we can take this example, which was, I mean, on the scheme of things, relatively small. This contractor, it doesn't say for how many years they were contracted, but let's presume it was quite a few because it was $5 billion. Oh, it says here over more than a decade. So yeah, it's a large contract. There's no doubt about it. But how much money has Ukraine received in the last 3 weeks or 3 months? I mean, it's tens of billions of dollars.
$67 billion since February.
Right, and that doesn't include the equipment, right? That's just straight up cash, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I feel like they're just handing over cash.
Probably. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
So who knows? It would be really interesting. I don't know if anyone has looked at this yet, but has somebody taken the numbers and said, all right, well, there was $40 billion in the beginning, and then I remember there was an $11 billion, and there was a $9 billion. I'm sure there's some I missed that I haven't seen come across my desk. But let's just take those numbers alone, and you're talking about $60 billion minimum. At least numbers that I've seen being shuffled over to Ukraine and its government, people in its military, plus God knows how much weapon systems, missiles, drones from you name it, to NATO, the United States. There's been different, didn't the UK funnel some in there or something like that? Different Western governments have been throwing money and throwing weapons at Ukraine. So, I mean, altogether, it's got to be at least $100 billion worth, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
That seems conservative to me at $100 billion in less than a year's time. So if you think this story is bad about $1 million printer and some contractor getting all this money over 10 years, just imagine the waste, imagine the corruption going on with Ukraine and all this money. Because there's no system in place. Once they have those billions, it's up to them how to spend it, right? This is just straight up foreign aid.
And all of this pales in comparison to all the money illegal immigrants are wasting by coming into this country, right? No, I'm just kidding.
You're being facetious. I mean, the immigrants are making money, right? Like they're working hard, they're getting things done, and and then it's just being squandered by the state. It's sick. So, Reed, you did something else recently that you wanted to discuss. Julian Assange, of course, as we know, is probably one of the probably the biggest press hero, if you will, of the last decade.
Yeah.
You know, he's maybe more than the last decade, but certainly within the last 10 years. He has had his freedom stripped from him for simply reporting the truth. Once again, speaking of the military, it was Julian Assange through his WikiLeaks. Then, obviously, there's more than Julian Assange involved in WikiLeaks. I don't mean to take anything away from any of the other volunteers or staff or whoever's involved there. But, of course, if you're involved with WikiLeaks, you probably aren't publishing it, publicly about what your involvement is for good reason, because they're going to take you and put you in a prison cell and try to destroy your life for the rest of your life, which is what they're doing right now to Julian Assange for revealing the truth, or just some of the truth, about what the U.S. military was doing in places like Iraq and Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And you're pretty concerned with this.
Yeah, I mean, what they're really doing is making an example, I feel.
Yeah.
I mean, they've already punished him, so at this point it's just about, sending a message to everybody else who would ever think about doing something like this. Because like you said, he's not even the guy who, found the information. He's the guy who received the information and then published it. And if that is punishable under the Espionage Act, then...
Which is what they want to charge him with, if they can get him extradited from the UK, where he's currently sitting in a maximum security prison, where he's been there for, I don't know how many years now, at least 4 years, I think. He's been there for quite a few years. Prior to that, he was in the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK for most of the last decade, 6 years, I think.
Yep.
And so he's basically been in jail the whole time, because you don't want to be in the Ecuadorian embassy. That's no fun. He couldn't leave the place or anything like that. So he was entrapped there. And now their high court, I believe is the term, has ruled that he must be extradited.
Mm-hmm.
And they're now appealing that to the UK Supreme Court. So there was an event, Free Julian Assange is what they call it?
Yeah, it was a Hands Off Assange event. They happened worldwide and nationwide. I went to the one in D.C.
We'll hear about it coming up here in moments. You can join the show. The number is 603-283-6160, and you can bring up absolutely anything you want in the remaining moments of Free Talk Live, which are coming up. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
Excuse me, is this where I get a license to start a new business?
I wouldn't be hasty. You have to get a license to go out of business, too, you know.
Oh, well, look, I've invented this little anti-gravity machine, see?
Oh, is that why you're walking 2 inches above the floor?
Oh, yes, it's very comfortable. It saves on shoe leather.
Yeah, well, you have to fill out these forms and report to the Human Services Department of Manpower Orientation and register with the Fair Employment Practice Commission, the Wage and Hour Division of the Employment Standards Administration, the State Sales and Income Tax Division, the Internal Revenue Service, and the Social Security Administration of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and, of course, OSHA.
OSHA? I thought that was a little town in Wisconsin.
You'll find out. Say, floating around like that could be dangerous. Have you checked with the Consumer Product Safety Commission?
Well, not yet.
Come to think of it, you actually are flying, aren't you? Look, you need to go over to the Federal Aviation Administration and the Transportation...
It's very hard to get anything done these days if you're in business, but free enterprise built this country. Think what could happen if we don't keep it free. A public service of this station and the Center for the Defense of Free Enterprise, Bellevue, Washington.
We just can't have people floating about unregulated, you know.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, you can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian
and Reed Coverdale.
You know, earlier tonight, Reed, I actually gave Donald Trump a little bit of credit for trying to make peace with North Korea, and there were some other things that he did that weren't quite as bad foreign policy-wise as his predecessors, the other recent presidents. But boy, one of the things he was really bad about was not pardoning Julian Assange.
Yeah, I've never
Snowden.
Understood why people thought he would.
I don't know,
because he went after him. He tried to go after him with the Espionage Act, you know, and he's like the reason that he
Well, I think the reason
arrested,
to think that he would was because before he got elected, he was all about WikiLeaks. Remember?
Yeah, just
Remember
because
that time?
They exposed Hillary Clinton.
Right. So he said
the election.
He had good things to say about WikiLeaks back then.
Sure.
So you would have thought, well, okay, well, Julian Assange did me a favor. I'm going to do you a favor, that kind of thing. Nope, didn't pardon him. And so now he's still sitting behind bars. And I do have a story here, and we'll talk about the event that you went to. But I was looking for an excuse actually to share this from Stella Morris. That is Julian Assange's wife, and she wrote this piece for The Independent in the UK. She says last Friday, so this is several weeks old. Home Secretary Priti Patel gave her approval for the UK to send my husband Julian Assange to the country that plotted his assassination. Julian remains imprisoned in Belmarsh after more than 3 years at the behest of U.S. prosecutors. He faces a prison sentence of up to 175 years for arguably the most celebrated publications in the history of journalism, when we're talking about revealing the truth about what the U.S. military was doing in the Middle East. Patel's decision to extradite Julian has sent shockwaves across the journalism community. The Home Secretary flouted calls from representatives of the Council of Europe, the OSCE, almost 2,000 journalists, and 300 doctors for the extradition to be halted. When Julian calls around the children's bedtime, they talk over each other boisterously. The call only lasts 10 minutes, so when it was ended abruptly the other night, Max, who's 3, asked tearfully if it was because he'd been naughty. I absentmindedly said it wasn't his fault, but Mike Pompeo's. 5-year-old Gabriel asked, "Who is Mike Pompeo?" Mike Pompeo had been on my mind because while the Home Secretary in this country was busy signing Julian's extradition order, in Spain a high court judge was summoning Pompeo for questioning regarding his role as director of the CIA in their reported plots to murder my husband. While at the helm of the CIA, President Trump's most loyal supporter reportedly tasked his agents with preparing sketches and options for the assassination of their father. The citation for Pompeo to appear before the Spanish judge comes out of an investigation of Julian and his lawyers through a company registered in Spain. Spanish police seized large amounts of electronic data, and insiders involved in carrying out the clandestine operations testified that they acted on instruction of the CIA. They had discussed abducting and poisoning Julian. Gabriel was 6 months old at the time and had been a target too. One witness was instructed to obtain DNA swabs from a soiled nappy in order to establish that Julian was his father. Another admitted to planting hidden microphones under the fire extinguishers to tap legally privileged meetings between Julian and his lawyers. The recordings of Julian's legal meetings in the Ecuadorian embassy in London were physically transported to their handlers in the United States on a regular basis. A break-in at Julian's lawyer's office was caught on camera, and investigators discovered photographs of Julian's lawyer's legal papers taken inside the embassy. The operations targeting his lawyers read like they're taken from the Soviet playbook. Across the pond, ever since the Nixon administration's attempted prosecution of the New York Times over the Pentagon Papers over half a century ago, constitutional lawyers had been warning that the 1917 Espionage Act would one day be abused to prosecute journalists. It was President Obama's administration that enlivened the creeping misuse of the Espionage Act. More journalistic sources were charged under the act than all previous administrations combined, including WikiLeaks' source Chelsea Manning, CIA torture whistleblower John Kiriakou, and NSA spying whistleblower Edward Snowden. Following massive public pressure, Obama commuted Chelsea Manning's 35-year sentence. Obama declined to prosecute Julian for publishing Manning's leaks because of the implications for press freedom. Well, maybe. After the Obama administration's Espionage Act charging spree, it was just a matter of time before another administration expanded the interpretation of the act even further. That day came soon enough. Trump's administration broke new legal ground with the indictment of Julian for receiving, possessing, and publishing the Manning leaks. Meanwhile, in Langley, Virginia, Pompeo tasked CIA assassination plans. Priti Patel's decision comes amidst sweeping government reforms of an increasingly totalitarian bent. The plans to weaken the influence of the European Court of Human Rights and the decision to extradite Julian are the coup de grace. The Home Secretary's proposed reforms to the UK's Official Secrets Act largely track the Trump-era indictment against Julian. Publishers and their sources can now be charged as criminal co-conspirators, and not just in the U.S. She's talking about the UK there. Julian's extradition case itself creates legal precedent. What has long been understood to be a bedrock principle of democracy, press freedom, will disappear in one fell swoop. As it stands, no journalist is going to risk having what Julian is being subjected to happen to them. Julian must be freed before it's too late. His life depends on it, and your rights depend on
it. Side note, you know who just endorsed Don Baldock today?
Nope.
Mike Pompeo.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's not a happy little story.
No.
And it's not a happy situation. And she's absolutely right. One of the most important things I think that people should realize here is that, oh, yeah, Obama didn't, quote unquote, prosecute Assange, but he laid the groundwork for it.
Yeah.
And every president always utilizes the powers that were accumulated in the previous presidency. No president goes in there and says, oh, you know what? I don't really need this power. I'm going to just go ahead and destroy all these executive orders and to fire all these people. No, they go in and they build on top of it. So Trump did this stuff towards Assange, and Biden is doing zero to change it. Biden's continuing the prosecution.
Yep.
So no one in government is doing the right thing. So Reed goes to Washington.
Yep.
What happened?
Well, I was down in Maryland, Goldsboro, Maryland, out in the middle of nowhere at the Liberty Speaks event with Spike Cohen. We were both
who's the former Libertarian Party vice presidential candidate from 2020.
Correct. We're friends. He was speaking there. I was speaking there as well. And there was this event going on in D.C. the same weekend. It was put on by a bunch of left-wingers. Jill Stein was there. Chris Hedges was there. Scott Ritter was there. He's not a left-winger, but he was another one who was present. A bunch of people there. And so they asked Spike if he'd be willing to speak, so I drove Spike over there from Maryland, and he gave a good speech. It was good being amongst a bunch of anti-war leftist activists, because I feel like, at least in the bubble I've been in, that it seems like the anti-war, anti-establishment left has kind of evaporated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're just like this really crony kind of champagne socialist morons. But it was good to see, like, legit.
There's still some out there.
Yeah, there are some. Jill Stein gave a great speech about how if we don't free Assange, the ice caps are going to melt. You know, classic Jill Stein. And then Spike got up there and, you know, they said the Libertarian Party nominee for vice president from 2020, and everyone was kind of like grumbling. But then he gave a really fire speech and had a huge round of applause.
Good.
So it was good. I think it was good.
So what was the goal of this event?
I think just raising awareness, but unfortunately, with all these types of events, it seems like all of the attendance is people who already know there's a problem. You know, it seems like we need to almost, I guess I'll use the word sabotage, like a bigger event that's taking place by going in and trying to, you know, raise awareness about this. Like, I mean, because every time we put something like this on, everybody who's attending already knows the issues, and you're not really spreading something unless you're in front of other people.
Was there any media present?
There was independent media, so like Ford Fisher was there.
Okay.
Those types of people. I think one...
He covers everything.
Yeah. He's great, by the way.
Yeah,
I just want to give him a shout out. I didn't even know forever what his personal opinions were on anything.
He's an anarchist, I believe.
He is.
Yeah.
But I didn't know because you just wouldn't know.
He just reports on
stuff.
Yeah.
Like you're supposed
to. And he gets
you know?
in the thick of it, too.
Yeah.
He's ballsy as hell.
Yeah. But I don't think there were any mainstream news sources there, of course.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, how... I mean, I understand that they're afraid, right? Like the media people, if they can do this to Assange, they can do this to anyone, and that's the message that they want to send. But that doesn't mean you can't report on this.
Right.
I mean, is that how afraid they are? They're not even willing to touch this issue to even show what people are saying about it? Anyway, catch up with Reed on his show. He's there a bunch of times during the week over at Naturalist Capitalist on Odyssey and YouTube. So find him there, and we'll see you tomorrow night online. In the meantime, you can join us at freetalklive.com.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at Bitcoin.com. That's Bitcoin.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191.